if I get on here and you say, Seth, that didn't happen to you, now I can just say, fuck you, you have to believe me, how dare you doubt me and all of my trauma. And the thing is, I don't even have to defend myself. There's gonna be like 1,000 people that'll jump in the comments and be like, how can you say that? What you just said is a very good question, and a very hot topic, because so many people will jump on that and be like, you need to believe them and everything they say. Well, just today there was just a girl who came out who supposedly was raped by an entire like hockey or lacrosse team 20 years ago, and it was all a fucking lie. And she just came out and said it was a fucking lie. And so it's like, and look, man, if things happen to you, I'm sorry, and that's fucking tragic. Like, we get it. But what makes me different, and I guess because I just had somebody reach out and ask me a couple questions of like why I tell my story, how I got to the point of where I'm at writing a book and all this other shit. And I said to this person, I said, what have you done in your life that would inspire somebody?
Let's go! All right, what is up, guys? Welcome back to I Came With Fire podcast. I am not Brandon. I am Chris. I am just a guest, but I am filling in as the captain of the ship for tonight. Brandon, unfortunately, got called away on a super secret mission. He's off. I do believe descrambling satellite clusters in the ozone layer or something like that. I think Elon gave him a call, said I need some help with some of this stuff. So he's off doing cool guy things with his cool guy friends. But we're gonna roll on tonight in his stead. Who we got with us tonight is Seth Gehle, author and speaker. He wrote a book called Strength Beyond the Shadows, and a former Army guy, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
All
yes,
right,
sir.
cool, man. So we're gonna talk with you tonight all about where you came from, some of your experiences, and then get into your book and just kind of delve deep into your story. Got to let you guys know a little bit about our sponsors before we jump in there. Obviously, we got Protect, we got Kill Cliff, we got the Light Sleeper. We've got, who else we got? TJ, who am I missing? Gotta try and remember. They're gonna be mad.
So good.
I have to go look at the list. They're going to be so bad because they're the sponsors, and I freaking forgot some of them because I got put myself on the spot. But yeah, Kill Cliff, freaking Protect, guys, go hit those guys up. And then, of course, if you look down in the show notes, you're going to see the codes that are going to get you some sweet freaking discounts when you're over there and hanging out.
Sheep's Clothing.
Oh, yeah. Those guys, too. We love them. So go check those guys out. And then, of course, Redefine Violence and Honor the Tribe Outdoors. They do not sponsor us, but we have a really close relationship with them. So go check those guys out, especially if you're a veteran. And, yeah, without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to these two dudes to introduce themselves, and then we're going to jump right into it. TJ, do your thing, man.
Fantastic. Of course, I am TJ Castle, also known as Free Castle on Rumble. The Take Up Your Cross podcast Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Central Time, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, we have Live Fire every Friday, 9 p.m. Central, 10 p.m. Eastern. And I Came With Fire podcast typically airing on Saturdays, 11 a.m. Central Time, noon for you folks on the East Coast. So I am officially number 2 here on I Came With Fire. And also usually do production stuff in the backfield. So Brandon is generally our captain, but he has abandoned us for cooler people at the moment. We are not quite up to his standards, but once he gets bored with them, he'll come and he'll join us.
He'll come back. They always
That's
come
right.
back.
He always comes back.
And then, of course, Seth, please introduce yourself and then tell the people where they can find you and where they can support you up front here.
Yeah, man. Seth Gehle. I am a author, speaker, amongst many other things, husband, father, whole bunch of titles I could probably list off. Veteran, I guess, and I am a veteran. I don't know why I say I guess, but I guess the easiest way to find me, connect with me, is on Instagram or my website. So my Instagram is just Seth_Gehle, last name Gehle, and then I do have a website. It's just SethGehle.com. So it's like 2024. So I think you can pretty much find, if you need to find somebody, you can find somebody with a quick Google. Instagram is usually the easiest way to find and connect with me, but I'm on all the platforms.
Solid.
Except for Rumble. Except for Rumble. I was just told about Rumble.
What are you doing? That's where this episode is going to drop for sure.
No doubt about it.
Yeah. So I'm so busy it's like hard enough managing like just an Instagram account, and I'm not a social
Right.
media person, so trying to like take my Instagram posts and then put them on YouTube and TikTok and X and whatever the fuck else I use, LinkedIn. It's already like so much. So
No, I'm not a big social media guy either, and I'm not quite sure if Instagram allows like any form of streams to relay to it or anything, but I know X, of course,
You
does.
can go
Twitch, a
live on
lot of the other
Insta.
services.
Yeah, you can. So
I
they
wonder
have
if you
the
can
feature where
relay,
you can
if you can
drop.
simulcast.
You can. Yeah.
Cool.
I've seen a
See,
lot of
that
guys
might be
do it.
beneficial to you. It's
But
like we quite often do everything on Rumble, and it also casts down to those other networks, down to X and everything else. So
oh,
you
okay,
can kind
yeah.
of keep all your bases covered in one. Cool thing with Rumble is they give you the option to kick switches on for like X, Twitch, I believe. Instagram may be one of the ones that's on there, so you don't even have to worry about trying to put in stream keys or trying to align any kind of URLs. It'll automatically link your accounts for you
Oh,
and
wow.
broadcast to your channel. So it's a pretty cool way to rock with it, man.
for sure.
It's
But
a
here's
good
the
place
thing:
to
if you're
be.
going to stream to Instagram, you better mind your P's and Q's because you'll get nuked off of there really quick. Which is
Oh,
a
no
great
kidding.
segue into a thing that I have to say every single time we do this, and that is all the opinions and viewpoints that are stated here tonight are completely and totally that of the individuals that are stating them and are not representative of any other organization or entity, especially not the DoD. Because we would never dream of speaking for the DoD. All right? This is entirely intended for entertainment, and your listener discretionship is advised. All right, with that, hey Seth, I legally have to do that. There's a whole story behind it. So anyway, dude, can you for anybody that's never heard of you before, right? Author and speaker. My first question is going to be this: what gave you the motivation, right? Or inspired you to get out there and write a book? Because that's like a big deal, man. You go from Army infantry, well, I'm gonna write a book, but you did it and you pulled it off, right? Because I think I've kicked around the idea of writing a book. I know Brandon has, right? But that's an accomplishment, man. So what motivated you to do that?
Well, that's a whole story in itself, but really, I mean, it started probably when I was like, I used to say I was 10 years old. I think I was about 10 years old and I realized I don't know if I knew I was going to write a book, but I knew I was going to do something incredible with my life. Just something amazing, something like profound. And then when I was about 12 years old, I think that's when I like really had a computer and had access to like the internet. Thus, I found a motivational speaker. His name's Eric Thomas, and he's like fucking incredible. He's the most renowned, famous speaker in the world, and he's just electric. Like if you watch one of his videos, even if it's just a 30-second clip, a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, I mean, he's just incredible. He has an incredible energy that he brings. And I saw one of his speeches, and I saw him talking about just the struggles of life and kind of like how these things didn't define him. And it was just this very powerful like clip. And I was like touched by it. Like 12 years old, I was like, holy shit, like this guy, like he has been through something and now he's on stages speaking about it, but in a powerful way. And when I saw that, I knew I was going to become a motivational speaker one day. I just knew it. I was like, I've got an insane story. I've got to get out there and share it and tell it, because if this guy can do it, then I can do it. And that's kind of what happened. That's kind of what happened with so just as a kid I knew I was going to do it one day. And then as an adult, about a year and a half ago, I've finally committed to the full process. So I actually wrote my book 3 times and deleted it 3 times, like completely scrapped it and was like, you know what? Nobody gives a shit. Like, fuck this story. It's not going to make a difference. It's not that bad. I had all the excuses of like kind of just minimizing my story, not understanding how impactful it would be. And then I finally committed to it. And I was like, all right, I wrote it again, freaking went full send on it, and here we are.
So how long in total writing process? You said you rewrote it 3 times?
Yeah.
From the first time you started typing till...
Yeah. So the first time I really started typing it out, that was like probably 3 years ago. And I would get like 20 to 40,000 words, and then I delete it, and I do the same thing and delete it, do the same thing and delete it. Because I mean, getting like 20,000, 40,000 words on paper, that's a lot. I mean, my book in entirety is about 65,000, 70,000 words. So I was about halfway, a little over halfway done with the book each time. And then I just deleted it. And this last time, so once I committed to the last time, it took me about, I would say probably 15 months. Once I got the final manuscript complete, and I was like ready to actually move forward and stop bullshitting myself, it was about 15 months of editing and proofreading and design and all that good stuff.
So I have a question that I want to ask you about. You made the statement about minimizing my story, which is why you went through the rewrites. But before I can ask you that, let's just roll back to the beginning, and can you just share the story with us that your book covers? Because for a lot of the people that have never heard of you, like, let's just go back to the beginning. Can we do that?
Yeah, so I'll preface that with I'll give you guys a condensed version, obviously. There is almost no platform that I can speak on that would justify the gravity of the situation of my childhood and life. There's just not enough time to do it in a single sitting. Usually it would take me probably 8 to 10 hours, right? So in a very condensed version, and the reason why I emphasize that is because a lot of times when you read a book, it could be a crazy story, but it's a book and there's only so many pages that you can put in a book and so many words. Therefore, they usually will pick 2 or 3 stories or maybe 4 or 5 stories that kind of sum up different periods of life, you know? And so just to be clear, I'll kind of go over this, but it'll be like a glossing over 16 years of absolute hell. But this was like just a daily violent, abusive, neglectful childhood that I went through, and that many people go through. It's not like this once or 2 stories that you hear, and like that was it. It's most of the time it's a daily occurrence. Whenever we tell our stories, we only have limited time, so we have to kind of pick the ones that really make some big impact for whatever reason. So, anyways, I preface that with that part. So, so I was born to get into the story, right? I was born to my mother had me and my 2 sisters by the time she was like 18, 19, maybe 20, had us real quick. There was, from what I can tell, there was like little to like no support, with her. And my whole family tree is just full of like broken branches and trauma and neglect and shit. You know, it's generational. They call it generational trauma for a reason, right?
Well,
so
it's better than TJ's family tree, dude. His looks like a telephone pole.
Yeah, that.
There we go.
Yeah.
Mine too, don't worry.
No, that's not good. But anyways, yeah. So a lot of generational trauma. So my mom probably had her own pain. My father certainly had his own, and their parents the same. So by the time I was like 2 years old, my mom and my father got into a fight, and my dad ends up stabbing her behind the ear, almost kills her. And he goes to prison for some undisclosed amount of time. I have no idea how long he went to prison for. All I know is I never knew him growing up. So fast forward a couple of years, I'm about 5 years old. The earliest memories I have are being 5 years old and living in this apartment complex, single mother, 3 kids. She would work all day. We would go to school, come home, and take care of ourselves. So we were doing the laundry, cooking simple dishes, cleaning up the house. We were doing all those things, me and my sisters, by ourselves. And that's just out of necessity. I don't think there was anything necessarily wrong with that. But single mother, 3 kids, kids have to learn how to fend for themselves. And
you guys are just getting by, man. And are you the youngest?
I was a middle child. Yeah, I was a middle child, yep. And truthfully, it's crazy. I mean, the times have certainly changed. But when I was a kid, it just didn't. Even now as an adult looking back on it, like I have a 6 and a 4-year-old, and I couldn't imagine leaving them at home. But with that being said, I know that they could manage. I guess they can survive. Given the tools and the proper backing and all of the things, they could do it. I mean, I
Sure,
was
they're
able to do
very,
it.
very resilient. They adapt quickly.
Yeah,
Changes in
they are.
circumstances.
And the unfortunate part of the flip side of that is everybody says that. Everybody says kids are very resilient. In fact, they can survive, but they're very malleable. So
Right.
when they are in those positions to survive and to be alone and whatever, they mold themselves into whatever it is they need to mold themselves into to survive.
Right.
So then you
Well,
get into all this other shit
well,
of like,
it kind of reminds
The
me of one of the.
psychological aspect, yeah.
Sorry to cut you off,
yeah,
Seth, but it reminded me of a situation that I had during one of my deployments where it was like I had a team sergeant that pulled me aside. He was just like, "Hey, by the way, this last 2 weeks that we just went through," he was like, "I just want you to know, he's like that's not what he was like. We went through more in those 2 weeks than I have in like 3 previous deployments combined, right?" And he was like, "I just wanted you to have some perspective on that." Because it was like after coming through that and it being my first trip, I was like, "Holy crap! Is this what it's always going to be like?" You know what I mean? And kids are the kind of the same way. One of the reasons they're so resilient is because they don't have context
sure,
to apply things to, and then to a kid, it's like, well, is
yeah.
this just what it's like? Is everybody going through? I just assume everybody like this is how everybody lives, because they don't have anything to compare it to. So that is both a blessing and can very much be a curse, depending on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head right there. And for us, there were I could look back on this in my childhood and think of all these like everything that I went through in its own was a blessing and a curse. There's a lot of good and a lot of bad. I try to utilize all the good out of it. And so part of the bad was when you're at home alone and your parents aren't there. My mom had she had a massive like porn collection. And so we found porn at 5 years old and started watching porn, which that'll jack up your brain as a
Right.
young man. And so we started doing that. In fact, I ended up trying to have sex with a girl when I was 5 years old. A young girl in my neighborhood, same age. I had no idea what I was doing. We were fully clothed. I remember that
Because you
though.
were mimicking what you had
Yeah,
seen.
Right.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so and then that just stems into further bad circumstances, being that I ended up getting molested by one of the babysitters who would frequently babysit us, and we would be with this babysitter sometimes for a week or two at a time, maybe 3 weeks, because my mom she couldn't take care of us. And so they had a teenage son. The only frame of reference I have as far as time and age goes is that he looked like a grown man. I looked like a child. I just remember he had been 16, 17 when this happened. And yeah, that was like very mild, I would say, in terms of like molestation or whatever goes. Whereas he just touched me a couple times, made me touch him, exposed himself to me, and vice versa. It wasn't anything like really severe. And I'm not even like I don't even know if that affects me or affected me at all. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. I'm not really sure. I just have very distant memories of that. And I ended up reporting him, told my grandparents. My grandparents, brought the attention to the families, and they all denied it, which is pretty typical. And then we were kind of sent right back to that house to be babysat by them again. I don't remember that particular situation continuing, so they must have said something or whatever. I think it all stopped after I reported it, but it happened a few times, and that was kind of it. Fast forward a few more years, we're just kind of getting through life, single mother, 3 kids kind of thing. My mom had a bunch of different boyfriends. She was always fighting with the guys, so there was a lot of times where I would come home from school and she was bragging about getting in a fight. There'd be holes in the wall, glass on the floor, some like
Your
cups
your
being.
mom was bragging about this to you guys, the kids.
Yeah, I don't even know if bragging to us, but just with us in the room, just having conversations with us in the room that were just totally unnecessary to have around children. I'm pretty, I'm very filtered, but I have adult conversations around my kids, but I would never have a conversation that they don't need to hear. There's just
I mean,
time.
that's pretty standard
Yeah.
parents, but I mean, I guess then you have to have a certain level of understanding what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, right, in front of your kid. Because I mean, my wife and I, we have funny conversations. You're joking about stuff that goes on in the bedroom, but then it's always innuendo and things
Yeah,
that kids
right.
aren't going to understand.
Right.
Untraceable things.
Right. And then there's also times where it's like you're in the car and something
Yeah.
needs to be spoken about now, and it's more of a serious thing. And then, you're doing let me turn the radio up so the kids are, listening to Disney tunes or whatever it is. And then again, you're couching your statements or making
Yeah.
innuendo or, just that kind of stuff. But then again, that also speaks to whether or not you have like a context of like what's appropriate for children.
Exactly.
To
Yeah,
not.
it's
Whether
that
you care about-
consciousness of a parent that should be present.
Yeah, whether or not you care about the innocence of a kid or not and want to preserve it, I guess is the way
Right.
that I would describe it.
Now, was your mom was she kind of into substances and everything while this was all going on? Was she, into alcohol or drugs or anything like that? Or
She drank a lot and she smoked weed, but at that age, that was the extent of the drugs and any kind of substance abuse. And I don't even know if I would call her an alcoholic at that point. She was a single mother with 3 kids who had little to no concept of how to parent,
Right.
and not even due to her own fault. A lot of people think that parenting and parental and maternity and all this is like a natural thing, which it is to an extent, but there's a lot of science and psychology behind the if you were neglected of nurturing and caring and parents, it is actually not a natural thing. So as you grow older, you don't have this natural instinct to parent, and in fact, that's a lot of times you see these mothers that abandon their kids, toss their kids out, whatever, or just do like these inhumane things. They're not these people that are that come from benevolent households and like have like freaking mom and dad and all the support and money and all that. They come from bad places, and while it's not right, what they're doing is not right, and what my mom did was not right. When you understand the psychology of it, that they literally are doing what they think is okay, like they think is normal, and so a lot of it comes from, well, that's how I grew up, and
Exactly. I think when you said normal, that to me was the most apt description of it. Because if you've never seen what right looks like, this is what it looked like, and so then it becomes the next.
Exactly.
I
Yeah,
act
we're
like
all
my
very
parents
encapsulated in our own environments as kids, and I mean,
Yeah.
I remember that very well as well. I guess, not to try to take away from anything or anything along those lines, but my mother got pregnant with me while she was in a Catholic college, and she was put into a Catholic high school originally because she was kind of getting in a little bit of trouble in high school. She went into a Catholic college by my grandparents' insistence, and she got pregnant with me in her first year there. So she was 19 years old. In a place where you shouldn't be pregnant with a kid to begin with, very frowned upon at the time as well, being in the 80s, and just a really bad situation as far as that was concerned. Her and my father, so to speak, had decided that she decided she wanted to go ahead and have me. She thought it was morally the correct thing to do. He didn't want to be a dad, so they made an arrangement that he would go his separate way. He would never be allowed to contact me or do anything else, and in turn, she would never pursue him for any monetary responsibility either. So she stepped into that, and my grandfather was retired Chief Master Sergeant from the Air Force. He was very kind of, nose to the grindstone kind of guy, and he said, you're going to have to get a job, and you're going to take care of the kid. This is a choice you made. You're going to live with it. You're going to accept it. And in that, I was exposed to some strange environments in that as well, because she did have to trust some people. I had some weird babysitter incidents go on, nothing to your extent, but some things that threw some red flags early, and grew up in very weird sets of circumstances, being with a single mom. She's a tiny gal. She was trying to get a social circle. Did date on and off for a little while, and every once and again I'd meet these guys, not too often. She was pretty good about trying to shelter me from a lot of it, but I spent a lot of time getting bounced around because of it, because she had to be the sole provider, and because of that, of course, didn't have the time to be the sole individual raising a child by any means either. So it turns into a huge situation. She never married, so I was in a fatherless household from birth all the way to leaving after high school. So it is it's really interesting. And to me, it didn't seem like anything. Kids used to ask me in kindergarten, first grade, all the time, stuff like that, like, "Where's your dad? Why don't you have a dad?" And to me, it didn't mean anything. It's like, well, just don't. And I knew I had other friends that did, and it didn't really strike me as odd that they did and I didn't either. It's just that you kind of get that ball built around you as a kid that
Yeah.
makes you
Everything.
feel like this is
Yeah.
normal.
Right. Everything you just said is very similar to the situation for the initial probably I don't know 6 7 years of my life. There were a lot of bad places things that we were exposed to, but in the grand scheme of things, my mom was just surviving with 3 kids, and there is inherent bad that comes with that. It's just raising a child by yourself is the hardest thing to do in the world. There's a whole freaking explanation of this, in a book called Tribe, whereas 40 or 100 200 years ago, for every child there was 4 to 5 people raising a child, and now it's quite the opposite. For every caretaker there's 3 to 4 children that are left without, which is really really crazy. So anyways, yeah, it was probably 6 7 years old, and I remember my mom mentioning my father because she was always dating guys, and so she was always getting in fights, always very violent. And she mentioned she would always talk about my father in a bad way, in a bad light, because he was in prison and he didn't pay child support and XYZ. And so that was like the only thing I ever heard of him. And I remember being told one day, like, "Hey, we're going to go see your father." And so we go see him, and he's in, I meet my father in the prison. So I go to, talk to him at the cubicle, and I was like 7 8 years old. Couldn't talk to him the whole time. I mean, I just cried for 30 minutes. There's a black phone on the wall. He came in, sat down, and I just cried and cried and cried because I was so heartbroken to see, that's my father, And, I think around that age, I did start to pick up, like, whenever I'd go to other kids' houses, I just noticed the food. I noticed the household environment. I had a few very specific friends that had just a very good home. And I would go home and I would just feel so good in their house. Like mom, dad, food, freaking warm place to sleep. Like just, there was like a calming ease in their home versus mine. It was getting more and more violent. And, by the time I was 8 9 years old, my mom started to become abusive, started to become very physical, started like whooping us, beyond just a butt whooping, to the point of just, this is like without empathy, without love, without compassion. This is just purely angry, striking your children down. And there's a lot of stories I could tell you about that. And I remember being 10 years old and sitting in my bedroom, and my mom busts open the door and closed hand starts punching my sister in the face, bouncing her head off the wall. I'm crying in the room, and my mom looks at me, and because she had not hit me, she looks at me and says, "What are you fucking crying about? Stop being a fucking bitch." And, I'm 10 years old, and she says that to me. And,
Right. Was that anything that was like chemical or anything like that? Or was that just kind of her overwhelmed?
same, just, I don't think she was under the influence. Maybe she was, she was not to the point where it was noticeable yet, I guess.
Gotcha.
There was a very distinct moment, and I'll get to that here shortly, where she was very clearly in a completely different state. At this point, it was just, as far as I could tell, just drinking and smoking weed, and that was it. But this was like an everyday occurrence. So like I would come home from school, and there'd be 6 7 8 9 10 guys in the living room passing 2 or 3 blunts around, drinking, And in fact, at 10 years old, I can remember seeing my older sister, and they were smoking with them. And my sister was 11 years old. She wouldn't have been more than 11, sitting in a room with other adults. And that is the moment at 10 years old where I realized, like, oh, okay, this is not going to be my life. Like, I'm not going to, and I don't know what it was. I don't know what it was that was inside of me. I think some of us are born at this point. There's nothing I can credit it to other than like some of us just have this inherent resilient trait or something that is in our bodies that,
Sure.
where at that moment I was like, I'm not going to go down that path. And there's a lot of reasons why. I wanted to go to college. I actually wanted to play football for Ohio State. I wanted to be an Ohio State running back, and that never panned out, obviously. But I had these like dreams and these aspirations, and that's kind of what kept me not wanting to, because I just knew drugs were bad. Like we had
Right.
Dare in school, and it was like the tiger and whatever the hell, and so it's like don't
Yeah.
do drugs, you know. So I was like, all right, I'm not going to do drugs.
Yeah, I
And
remember
so
Dare.
yeah, so like I just had this thing in my head that I would never go down that path, but that is actually the moment that I recall where I knew. I remember going up the stairs and thinking to myself like, my life is so weird. It's so crazy. I'm going to tell this story one day, and it's going to blow people's minds because I'm surviving this. And I say that because my
It's a
mom.
dream that actually did come to fruition, man. So it's great.
Exactly. It's crazy to reflect back on that because I remember it so vividly. Because around that time, that's when, like I said, my mom she's close hand striking. Our house was broken into 3 times. Two of the times we were there, and my mom would work at night, so. I remember my sisters waking me up. One of them had a knife in their hand. The other one had the cord of her alarm clock wrapped around her hand, and the alarm clock kind of hanging like a weapon. And they say, "Hey, Seth, somebody's breaking in." So we run downstairs, and
Oh shoot, your sister's ready to throw down, dude.
dude,
I,
bro,
I like that though.
Environmental.
bro, it was fucking crazy. This was like one of the most like probably traumatic moments of my life. I mean, it was so long ago that it's like it's hard to remember. The feeling of it, but to this day, like, man, I have a fucking weird, like, if I hear shit outside, it fucks with me bad.
That just
So,
that kind of, not kind of, that enrages me as what I do for a living, being in the military. I have 4 sons of my own. I preach on here all the time about how the job of a man is to provide, protect, and preside over the people that he loves and who he is responsible for. And if I ever felt like my sons, that are all still below the age of teenagers, felt like they had to go to the fight because either I wasn't there or because I was unable to protect them, like I would feel this big, like that I'm not worth anything as a man, because like my number one job, if I can't keep my family safe, then what am I good for? And the fact that your sisters felt like they had to, it's just like look around and do the prison thing of like, well, that's a freaking mace, and just grab it and like, let's go throw down. That's both incredible, and also like I said, it just enrages me.
It's tragic for sure.
The scene
felt like she had to do that.
yeah, dude, I mean, the scene, like, we go downstairs, and I can remember standing in my kitchen looking at the back door, and, we had there was the handle, the deadbolt, and then we had a 2x4 nailed across the door because we lived in a bad neighborhood. So, I mean, this was to prevent access. And, I mean, I can remember standing in that kitchen watching 3 guys kick in my back door. And just, one of them had a baseball bat, one of them had a sledgehammer, and then the other one had like a shovel or some other sort of like blunt object. I can never remember what he had, but I mean, I can remember looking at the back door and seeing the back door just every time they hit it, it was just slowly inching open. And me and my sisters were just standing there because my mom's at work. There's nobody there with us. And we're, 9, 10, 11 years old, and it was just, I mean, it felt like hours, and we had a big ass Rottweiler. He's jumping at the door. And me and my sisters, I think we're probably screaming at him, telling him to go away or stop or whatever. I mean, we're crying. We're just hysterical. And my neighbors they fortunately had come outside, and so they ran away. So they called the cops. My mom comes home. My mom, shows up, and it's like, okay, this thing happened. Okay, go back inside and go back to sleep. Wake up, go to school the next day. So like we go to school the next day, show up like nothing fucking happened. Meanwhile, the night prior, I mean, one of the most traumatic things that can happen to a child, probably. And you're just like back at school the next day, no therapy, no like, hey, we know that was really scary, this and that, like, it won't happen again. None of that shit. It was just like, boom, there was no time to process it and understand what happened. And so the worst part about that is it happened again about 2 weeks later.
Where are you guys living? Sorry to cut you off, but
Yeah.
like kind of geographically in the United States, where are you guys at?
Lima, Ohio is where I grew up.
I know Lima very well.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we grew up in Northwest Ohio, Lima, Ohio. For those who don't know, it's like 30,000, 40,000 people, small town America. As a kid growing up in Lima, it felt like we were in the big city. Like it has a big city feel when you're a kid. I don't know, because you've never been to a big fucking city. So that's the Midwest for you. Anyways, so and Lima's not a great place. It's on 75. It's on human trafficking highway. It's on it's an hour south of Toledo, 2 hours south of Detroit. So there's just a shit ton of drugs and violence and gangs that comes straight through Lima. It's pretty bad.
Small enough place to have enough boredom that a lot of people do things they're not supposed to.
Yeah, and yeah, it's got its own problems. I mean, it's got some serious problems there, and all the surrounding suburbs and communities, they all feed into Lima because Lima is the biggest city around there within an hour or so. Toledo's the next biggest, and they just feed into each other. And anyways, so 2 weeks later, same thing happens. Somebody breaks in. I actually woke up in my neighbor's arms that time. I just remember him running through the hallway in my house, and I'm in his arms, and he said, "Hey, don't worry about it. Somebody broke in." Same situation. At this point, we realized that the people knew my mom's work schedule. So we knew that these people knew us, which is kind of scary because they were waiting for her to leave to come in and break in. And we didn't have anything, okay? Like, we didn't have money or drugs or, like, TVs or electronics, or we didn't have anything for them to steal. So I don't know what they were going to steal. And the fact that they're kicking in a door at 9 p.m., 10 p.m., I don't know what they were coming after, but sometimes it makes me wonder if it was me and my sisters.
You, yeah.
Yeah, So, I can't say for certain, but it does seem that way sometimes when I do think about that.
Right.
So not only was my mom abusive, there was this lack of security, this lack, the whole bunch of fights and bullying and all of those things as well. And when we grew up without a father, the last thing I'll say with that particular house, I ended up coming home one day, walking home from school. I wasn't supposed to walk home from school. I walked home with my cousins, and we were getting into a bunch of shit on the way home. So we took our sweet time, like typical boys would do. And there we go. You got me?
Yeah, you're still here, brother. We got you loud and clear.
Okay. My screen dropped for a second. Anyways, we were coming home from school, and my we were like an hour or two late because we didn't take the bus, and so my mom was pissed, and she wasn't like mad, like, "Where have you guys been? I'm so worried," or whatever. It was like, "Where the fuck have you been? Like, you are a massive inconvenience in my life," basically. So, it's like, "Hey, go upstairs. I'm going to whoop your ass." And, I was like, "Okay, whatever," like typical, whatever. I go up, bend over the bed, grab the blankets, just hang on, and she's going to whoop me, and we're going to be done. It'll be like 3 paddles, and we're done, right? And the first time she hit me, that was when I realized, like, okay, this is not good. This is different. And within like just a half a second, I processed it, and I bounced off the bed. I fall to my knees. She continues striking. Okay, so she hits me 3-4 times across the back with this board, and I remember falling down and crying and screaming and just kind of begging her to stop, and then wondering like why my life was taking this path. Like why my mom was beating the shit out of me. And the whooping itself was not, the physical thing is not that bad, but the emotional damage of your mom beating the shit out of you and then leaving you there on the floor without apologizing, without "I love you," without "Hey, you can't do that," without like no lesson to be learned. And the only thing she said to me was, "Get the fuck out of my room, go to your fucking room." And so I like low crawled in my room and freaking I'm in my bedroom and I'm just crying and crying and crying for hours, and I'm just hurting, man. And so it just sucked. And that's when I probably started having suicidal ideation. I was 10 years old and started thinking about killing myself. Started thinking about, I can remember looking out my window at night and just thinking like, if I fall just right, I'll break my neck and die. I would think about shooting myself, stabbing myself, drowning myself. Probably the leading thing that stopped me from taking any action was I was terrified to feel pain. I didn't want to feel the blade. I didn't want to feel the gunshot. I didn't want to feel the fall. I knew I could take pills. I knew I could take a bunch of medicine. I didn't want to feel sick. I didn't want to feel that feeling before I died. You know, I wanted to, if I knew I could just cut the cord and be done with it, I probably would have done it. And suicidal ideation started 10 years old. So here's where it gets, you know, the story really picks up. Because of everything that was happening, I looked outside of the home for love, and, you know, which is pretty typical in these situations. You grow up in a single parent household, or no parents, or neglect, abuse, trauma, whatever. You find it outside of the house. You find your place outside of the house, whether that's gangs, violence, drugs, whatever it is. And mine happened to be one of my best friends who lived around the corner from me. I ended up meeting this kid. For the sake of the story, I'll say his name is Jacob. It's just a pseudonym for him. So it's a fake name for him to protect his identity. But I meet him. He's 15 years old. I was 10. And Jacob kind of finds out that I have a jacked up life. And he kind of takes me under his wing, starts letting me hang out with him and his friends. You know, he's feeding me, let me play video games, spend the night. He's taking care of me, doing the whole thing. And he was like my hero. He was this big kid that was just a badass dude to me. You know, I loved him to death. And within a month or two, I'm over at his house, and this other guy walks in the front door, okay? This guy's 6'5", 6'6", 380 pounds. Big guy, looks like a left tackle. He's very big, but he looks very capable. Does not look like a sloppy individual whatsoever. Just a very powerful looking guy. And he's, you can tell he's Hispanic, but he's very pale, very, very pale skin. He's got the big, like Dahmer style, like wire frame glasses on, long black slick back hair. And he fucking walks in and he's like, hey, I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? And I'm like, what's up? And he's like, hey, you know, my name's Mondo. What's your name? Seth. You like football? I love football. You know, I'm a Packers fan. I fucking love the Buckeyes. Yep. So, you know, I was like, yeah, man, love the Buckeyes. He's like, you like video games? Yeah, man, love video games. You like pizza? Love pizza. Cool. So he's like, hey, well, why don't
you're 10 years old?
yeah, exactly, right. And I didn't
like
know
monster trucks and dinosaurs and robots too, don't you?
Exactly. And so, I didn't know his age at the time, but he was about 30 years old when I met him, 31, 32 years old. And he was a friend of Jacob's, and so I just trusted the guy, and I was cool with him. And he says, well, why don't you come up to the house with me and Jacob? So I said, okay, cool. So go home, ask my mom. My mom says, as long as you're with Jacob, you're okay. Boom. Go back, get in the guy's house, or get in the guy's car, and we freaking drive up to, or we go to a famous chicken place in my hometown. Orders me fucking full entree, sides, freaking desserts, large pop, like all the fucking shit that I've never gotten anything off the dollar menu. You know what I'm saying? So I was like, dude, this is fucking sick, man. I'm in the back of this guy's.
I'm tracking everything that's happening right now. And
yeah.
For anybody that understands like how the process works, yeah.
Yeah, and it's very. I hate to put it this way. I don't know how else to put it. For lack of a better word, it's very impressive what these people can do. Impressive is not the right word, but it's incredible. Maybe incredible is a better word for it, because it's not anything good, but it's incredible how strategic and calculated they are. So, anyways, he, you know, buys me a bunch of food. We're going to his house. We're listening to freaking AC/DC Metallica. AC's on. And we're just rocking out in the car. We get there and walk in the front door. I turn to my right. There's a big entertainment center. It's a big open studio apartment. So it's just one big room, okay? Turn to my right. There's like 2 or 3 TVs, 2 or 3 game systems. Back right corner has a couple desktop computers. The middle of the room has this big glass table with a bunch of Dungeons and Dragons stuff set up on it. There's a kitchen in the back right. Bathroom in the back right, and then, you know, his bed was in the back left corner, and it was blocked off with some black sheets, and couch, you know, in front of the TVs and all that. And I was just like, dude, this is sick, because multiple TVs, multiple game systems. It means we don't have to take turns. We can play video games all fucking night. And like, there's no mom or dad to be like, hey, it's time to go to bed. So sure as hell, you know, like, I mean, we played video. I don't think I went to sleep. The first weekend I was at his house, I don't think I went to sleep. I mean, I just stayed up playing video games, and he ordered pizza. We had pop, energy drinks, coffee. Like, it was fucking awesome, you know? And, played video games for like 48 straight hours. And,
Daggone, this sounds like a place where a 10-year-old boy would never want to leave.
Mm-hmm.
exactly, yeah. And especially when you consider where I was coming from, right? Where I was on welfare, like no food, mom, abusive, boyfriends,
Yeah, it's
assholes.
like paradise.
Exactly, man. This was like the play. And truthfully, I was like, man, like maybe my life is going to turn around. Like maybe like things aren't that bad, you know. And so I go home, and he's like, when do you want to come back? And I'm like, dude, I'll come back whenever. So next weekend, okay. From that point forward, I was 10 years old. From that point forward, it basically became routine that I would go to his house every single weekend from that point, okay? Like, no shit, every fucking weekend. 45 to 50 weekends out of the year. And, within a few months, I started going up there by myself, and I don't know if that was just due to the trust of the situation or what. But, my mom either stopped asking or she just didn't give a shit. But I was gone every weekend going to this guy's house. And, one weekend I was up there with Jacob. And on a Sunday, we're watching Sunday afternoon football. And Jacob goes to Taco Bell to go get some tacos. And it was always really, really cold in Mondo's studio apartment. And I remember sitting on the couch next to him. He's sitting on his chair, and he had this blanket covering him. And I'm like, damn, I'm thinking it's cold. And so he's like, well, why don't you get in my lap and, whatever, get under the blanket with me. So I get up in his lap. I'm sitting on his left leg. He's got his left hand on my left hip. And I'll never forget the way his hands feel. He had massive hands, just very calloused, rough knuckles, long nails. His hands were so rough and calloused, he would take his knuckles and like rub them together, and it would sound like rocks. So like his hands were just like very like rough and big. And so he's got his left hand on my left hip. His hand falls off, hits me in the butt, and
for anybody that can see where this is going, if this is something that's going to be really
children close by,
intense for you to listen to, or if you got kids listening to the podcast tonight, I just wanted to let you guys know, listener discretion highly advised from here going forward. We're not going to shy away from the topics, and Seth, I want you to share everything that you feel comfortable in sharing, because this shit has got to get drug out into the sunlight. Absolutely. And exposed for the evil that it is. And for those of you that do stick around, any of my dudes out there, I would just say, let this shit sink in and understand that this shit is out there and it absolutely exists, and let it fill you with a holy and righteous rage to do something about this kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
But I do just want to...
Indifference is just as evil.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I did just want to say that for anybody else. You guys can see where this is going. You've been warned. Seth, please continue.
Yeah, and with that, just a quick note on that. If you are listening and you do feel like you are about to go down this emotional path, if you can handle it, I mean, it's I would encourage you to listen. Even if you're going to cry, if you're going to be mad, if you're going to be upset, if you're going to be quote unquote triggered, right? The reason why I say that is because I have listened to so many stories, so many people's stories before I started telling mine, and each one of them made me feel some type of way. Each one of them made me stop and freaking take a breath and make me maybe shed a tear, made me feel, but those were all like healing. And I think cathartic is the right word for it. Is healing through somebody else's journey or whatever the hell. But that's my take on it, is that I tell my story the way I tell it for a reason. It is to evoke emotion. It is to evoke these memories. It is to get that fucking demon, that beast, that shadow, whatever it is, out of you through my story, because other stories have done that for me. So that's the reason why I tell my story the way I tell it.
I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that can't confront what they've been through.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it happens statistically to a lot more people than people think. And
Yeah.
we'll
So
cover some statistics just kind of overall on human
yeah.
abductions and child incidents here a little later on that I think will be kind of surprising to people,
Yeah.
particularly about our country right here and how high we rank compared to so many other places.
Yeah. I got most of the statistics locked up in here. So I've
As
been.
you do, brother, for sure.
Yeah. So, anyways, the guy's hand falls off my hip, right? Hits me in the butt, and he says, "I'm sorry." And I'm like, "Yeah, no big deal, man." Like, I equated it to like me and you bumping each other in the hallway. It's not a big deal. So, I said, "I'm sorry," or he says, "I'm sorry." I said, "It's okay." So he puts his hand back on my butt, and he says, "So this is okay." And I was 10 years old when that happened, and right when that happened, I knew the ride that I was on. I knew like, okay, I fucked up, and that's kind of how I looked at it. Was like, damn it. And it's almost like hearing that last click on a roller coaster, and you're about to go down the hill. You're locked in, and where am I going to go? Like I'm at this guy's house, I'm by myself. What am I going to do? Everybody loves this guy. By this point, I had met him. I had met his family. Um, I had met his family, his friends. Like we had other adult friends, and Mondo was the guy that everybody loved. He was the freaking everybody gave him hugs. He was funny. He was like the center of attention. Okay. I hear the wheels churning outside, and so Jacob was pulling back in from getting tacos, and at that point he moves his hand away, and we kind of sit there. And then what happens in most cases is you begin to gaslight yourself as you say, that didn't just happen. That's not actually happening. That's not a thing. That was a mistake. Whatever. You begin to formulate all these lies internally to justify the situation. And that's what I did, because his house was such a good place to go. I didn't want to believe what had just happened. It's not going to happen. I got to keep coming back because this is fun. This is a good place to be. And so, sure as hell, I go home, come back, and the cycle continues. And at the same moment that this happens, my mom ends up getting a new boyfriend. Oddly enough, this guy was he was like the pastor or whatever you call it at a church, guy who speaks and all that. And he was this light-skinned guy. He had cornrows, freaking gold teeth. I call him in my book, I describe him as a man with a crooked smile. I could just see through it. And he was feeding my mom all of these pipe dreams, and quite literally pipe dreams, as in he got her addicted to crack and cocaine. And so he gets her addicted to crack and cocaine, takes her under his wing, and he's very charismatic as well. He'd light up a room when he walks in, but I saw right through the bullshit. I knew he was a threat. And he gets my mom addicted. We end up going to a new home. We had gone without utilities many times before, without power, without gas, without heat, whatever. We'd done that many, many times. Wasn't really new to us. But this time in particular, it was just really tough because it was so fucking cold in our house. You could see your breath. And when we moved into this new home, I went upstairs. Me and my sisters go upstairs to find our rooms. My sisters always got the bigger room because there was two of them. They shared a room. I always got the smaller room. Pretty normal stuff. Well, I go upstairs and my bedroom has got hardwood floors. They're cracked and split all the way across. They're buckled all the way across the floor. Like it was like painful to walk across the floor. Like you had to tiptoes. Almost like walking on Legos. And I look up and there is a 3 foot by 4 foot hole in my ceiling. Literally just exposure straight to the attic above, to the elements. We ended up putting a tarp up there to stop the water from coming directly into my room, but it would snow and rain, and the weather would come straight into my bedroom. And in fact, that tarp, I remember looking up there, and it would slowly fill up with water. And in fact, one night it bust, and the whole fucking thing came down on me in the middle of the night. And in that room, I slept on like a little 4-inch mattress directly on the floor with a thin blanket, pissed the bed every night. I would wake up freezing cold. I can remember like my feet would be so fucking cold. My body would be cold because I'm sitting in my own piss. And, 10, 11, 12 years old.
If I could ask, are are you peeing the bed because like you absolutely don't want to get up and leave and go anywhere, or is it like more of a medical issue?
A lot of times
Do
it's
you
part of the
remember?
abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
proactive child abuse quite
yep,
often.
yep. It's a very, very common. Like if a child's wet in the bed, there's usually something going on. That's a very big indicator. And for me, it was the massive amounts of stress. That's all it was. It was just very stressful, and there's probably something to do with once you lay down and go to sleep, you're just in this like cocoon of like whatever. And or when you do go to sleep, there's so much stress. When you go to sleep, you're out, like you're done. That could be a level to it where I just wasn't waking up. And so I wet the bed every night, and I would wake up, freaking get ready for school, go to school. It was a horrible moment, man. Like we had no food. My mom was selling food stamps for drugs. Every day there would be, every day there would be 5, 6, 7 guys would come in the house. They'd go in the bathroom, get high, and they'd be in there for 5, 6, 7 hours a day. It was insane, man. And this is when I talk about like the switch was flipped for us, because like we were getting kind of nervous and like kind of like what the fuck is going on. And when we noticed that people were spending 5, 6, 7 hours in the bathroom, we were like, okay, yeah, they're something's happening in there. Like they're not just in the bathroom hanging out. But I can remember being that age, 10, 11 years old, seeing addicts on my couch passed out, shaking. They would come in there and sit on the couch, and their heads would tilt back, eyes would roll back. They'd be in there shaking, and I remember sitting here watching these guys like, what the fuck is going on? At that moment, my mom became even more and more. This was like the substance-induced rage, where she would grab us. She always had this thing where she would grab me by my face, and so she'd grab me by my face, and her nails would dig into my skin, and she'd slam my head against the walls. And I had long hair. I had hair down to my shoulders, and she would grab me by my hair and slam my head against the refrigerator. And I just remember these like very dark, abusive moments, and just
Right.
just being in that house was just a tough place. And so during that time, that is when I had first met Mondo. Okay, so the first 3 months or so, I was living in that house, and I began to tell Mondo like about my life at home. So I began to tell him like, hey, I've got this mom, and I've got a single mom, no father. My mom's abusive. I've got 2 sisters. I get bullied at school. I'm really smart, but I get bullied a lot.
Right.
I'm just going through all this pain and suffering and depression. Okay. And when I tell Mondo that, well, Mondo reiterates, he mirrors the same situation for him. So he begins to tell me like, oh yeah, when I was a kid, I had a single mother. She was abusive. I had a couple sisters. He was really smart in school, and he was also bullied. And so when he said all those things, like he was the first person I had ever come across in my life that I could relate to in its entirety,
Right.
And so, which is pretty typical like grooming behavior. Like that's like kind of, whether it was true or not, everything that I had gone through, he had supposedly gone through as a child.
I
Therefore,
explain similar things to my kids for things to kind of look for in behaviors with adults if they're in any scenarios, which there should never be. They're never left anywhere. Of course, they do go to public school, but I live in Texas in the middle of nowhere in the hills. The schools are like they were in the 80s, luckily. Very fortunate for them. But I've let them know. A lot of times you're going to think people seem really, really nice, and that's the whole thing, is somebody who has ill intent towards you is going to want to try to gain your trust. They're not going to do so by being a jerk to you. They're
exactly.
going to do so by telling you absolutely everything you want to hear.
Yeah.
And,
And
that's
that's
making it feel as if they're relatable. And
exactly. Yeah. And that's exactly what he was doing. I actually just found out recently that some of that probably does hold some merit. Somebody who actually, it's kind of crazy. Somebody read my book, and they had no idea who I was and what the story is about. And when they saw the name Mondo, they knew exactly who he was. They had grown up with him. And so they reached out to me, and they were like, holy shit. Like, and they gave me this whole backstory, about he was weird, and that his mom was, abusive and an alcoholic and all these things. So it does make sense. Nonetheless, yeah, he began to, gain my trust via, building commonality, which is very typical. So Um, yeah, so now at this point in my life, Monday through Friday is abuse, violence, neglect, drugs, just bad home life. Okay, and then Friday night, Saturday night, the sexual abuse would escalate rather quickly. Within a few months, of going up there, it became very normal for me to sit in his lap as soon as we got up there, and then it slowly progresses from just physical touch outside of the clothes to like one finger in the waistband to a couple fingers in the waistband to more fingers in the waistband to putting his whole hand in my shorts. One of the more like crazy moments that happened, and I put this in my book, I think, because this was like textbook 101, how to gain trust of a child or whatever you want to call it. I remember being in front of him one day, and I was standing in front. He was sitting in his chair, and he kind of leaned forward, and it was just me and him there. And he reached forward, and he grabbed my shorts, and he ripped my shorts down. And he had never seen me like naked before. Okay, so he rips my shorts down, and I'm completely nude, exposed to him, and I immediately bend down, pull my shorts up, and I start crying because I'm like incredibly embarrassed. And I'm just like embarrassed and like kind of hurt, and I'm like, man, like what the fuck just happened? And I'm crying and crying, and he pulls me in and he comforts me and he says, hey, what's wrong? And he's holding me, and he's like, hey, what's wrong? And I told him, I said, hey, that was really embarrassing, and I didn't want you to see me like that, and this and that. And he said, hey, you have nothing to be ashamed of. I'm so sorry that I did that. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. I thought it would just be funny and this and that. And what he was doing was testing the water, And what's really fucked up about it is there was nobody there to save me, okay? So if he hurts my feelings, the only person there to make me feel better is him, okay? So, and that's in their head, like, okay, if I know nobody else is here, so if I hurt this kid's feelings, all I got to do is give him some pizza, let him play the video game, give him a hug, tell him I love him, and he's good. And so there's this like fucking crazy power trip that happens, and that's what happened to me. And I actually forgot
Exactly what age again were you when the situation with Mondo started to kind of really
10 years old.
10 straight?
Yeah. So a lot of this happened in the first year that I knew him. So that was just like an example, and then because he had pulled my shorts down and seen me naked, so now there was this like added level of exposure, and therefore it was not unusual or out of the normal. So he would go back to bed, and then he would call me back to his bed, and I would lay in the bed with him, and I would begin to sleep with him back in his bed. And that wasn't anything crazy until it became crazy. At first it was just this like cuddling, like warmth, and I didn't have a father, so to be quite honest, the feeling of another man embracing me, it felt good. Like I wanted this love, and I wanted, like, it felt good to be back there and to be loved on, and not even like loved on, but just having this feeling of somebody cares about you. So that was really bad. And
was there a certain amount of, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for, rationale in your mind, if you can remember, that I'm willing to put up with all of this in order to get this that I've never gotten before, and if I have to pay this much, I guess it's worth it for this over here, if that makes sense what I'm describing?
Yeah, there was, because when I knew the sexual abuse was going to happen, there was a point where it was like, okay, this is happening every single weekend. And when I knew I was going to his house willingly, I would call him and tell him to come and pick me up, and he would come and pick me up, and I'd go to, like, I knew the things were going to happen, but it got me out of my house for a couple days. It got me a bunch of good food for the weekend.
So you're in your mind at that time, you're still stepping into a kinder environment than the one that you're usually in.
Yeah. There's a funny thing about like being in a hell like environment. Like, it sucks, but if you can get reprieve, like if you can go from being 150 degrees to negative 32, if you can just like cycle between those two, you can pretty much handle it, because there's like only so much freezing you can do. There's only so much hot weather you can handle. So as long as you can like go back and forth, that's kind of where I was at.
Well, if I can ask again, like, you're going to public school, yeah?
Yep.
And so, at any point during any of this, are any of the educators or guidance counselors or anybody recognizing? I mean, I would just imagine, because I had he's gonna love me ratting on him for this. I had a brother that wet the bed. Till he was like 8 years old, and we grew up in a very loving, kind household. My father was a pastor, but like an actual pastor in a church, not like what you described, like an actual Jesus, God-fearing, Jesus-loving minister, and so my brother was having like some medical issues, and I have a kid that's going on 6 that will sometimes still wet the bed, and it's something that because of medical issues he dealt with when he was very young, and a double inguinal hernia that he had repaired. He took him a while to learn to potty train, and so since he was very late to that, he's still dealing with some of that. Right, that's totally normal kid stuff. But I bring those up because I know what piss-stained pants smell like. Right. And it's hard to launder that out of clothes. And so it's like if you're showing up to school and you're wearing filthy clothes, a child that's 10 years old, if you're not eating right, like I'm sure you don't look developmentally correct to your peers. Like it's going to show that you're not growing as well, right? Like there are things that educators in the public school system are supposed to be looking for to say, hey, this kid is not. And then there's other psychological markers that go along with that, and the way that abused kids act towards figures of authority in the school system, right? When they're spoken to, when it's like, do they avert eye contact? Are they, it's like these are all things that we're supposed to be looking for in how kids present themselves, and then whether or not we need to report that right to the authorities to be like, I spend 8 hours.
When you were 10, this is the early side of the millennium, isn't it? It's like 2004.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, these are things that teachers are supposed to be looking for and saying, it's like if you're in the public school system, these people spend 8 hours a day with our kids. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And so it's like, nobody at your school, did they ever ask you if you were okay? Did you ever get pulled aside?
Yeah, so it's funny you asked that, because the first chapter in my book is what happens in our house stays in our house. And so, unfortunately, my mom, due to the nature of protecting herself, would tell us like nothing. You don't say shit to anybody. So we did get pulled out. Teachers would drag us out, and I talked to Child Protective Services a lot growing up.
Okay.
Yeah, and you can imagine how hurt they must have been to know that this kid needs some fucking help.
Exactly.
And every time they sat down with me, I would tell them it's none of your fucking business. I mean,
all the signs are there.
Yeah, verbatim, I would say, like, it's none of your fucking business at 10 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old. And I'll get into a little bit more of the psychology of that.
Sorry, I pulled.
No, you're good.
Like, that blows my mind.
Yeah, it's a question that makes sense, but unfortunately, I knew that was the answer you were going to give as well.
Like,
I've worked with people that are in that situation and have been in those situations before, and that's exactly how it is. I've explained it like this, I guess. My mom, she wasn't abusive, but she made a lot of mistakes, and because she was so focused on her career and trying to prove she could successfully take care of a child financially, there wasn't any love in the house. She was focused on trying to make sure she took care of me, but she was doing it as a responsibility, not as a want.
Yeah.
And in that, even though my friends would come over and they'd be like, man, your mom's a bitch, they say stuff like that, I felt she walked on water regardless. And that's kind of that same thing, is even with all the abuse and everything else, you keep it locked in your head. That was your one parent. That's your mom. She was your support system. And even with all of the things that she was doing at the time as a kid, you still look at her with an element of respect. You still follow the rules.
Yeah, and around this time, around like 10, 11, 12 years old, like that's when when I walked up to my room and I saw the hole in the ceiling, and like I knew this was where my mom was putting me, and then she was addicted to drugs at that point. I did actually begin to lose that respect for her. And I mean, I loved her to death because she was my mother. But there was something in me that was like, what? But I still couldn't say anything.
You knew you were being put in a dangerous situation by that point in time, because you were just starting to hit that age to where you start to have the greater state of awareness, I guess. You grow away from where you're dependent on everything, and you start composing your own thoughts and your actions a lot more around that state.
And it's kind of funny. Like the same time I began to like resent my mother and to understand the situation, It was about the same time I began to hate going to Mondo's house. And, after you do something for a year every fucking weekend, for you to step away from that, like, it would be like, why? So at some point you get so deep into it that how do you escape it without raising questions? Okay.
Trade the devil you know for one that you don't.
Well, yeah. So here's the thing, right? That's what was going through my head was like, okay, I don't want to go up here anymore. But if I stop, like somebody's going to ask me, and then like, what are they going to say? Like I got to explain myself or what? So you just get scared, and so you just keep going back. And long story short, by the time I was about 12 and a half years old or so, I was almost 13. I was probably 6 months from being 13, and well, it was longer than that, but. I guess I had just turned 12, technically. I got back from Mondo's house, and he had been abusing me for over 2 years at this point. Okay, I got back from Mondo's house. It was a Sunday, and my sisters were at my neighbor's house, which is kind of odd. But anyways, I went over there. They were never over there, so I went over to the neighbor's house. They're watching Intervention. Fucking couldn't make this shit up. They're watching Intervention. Intervention, if you don't know, that's an old TV show, about saving people, addicts, right? At the end of at the end of every episode, there's a contact forum, and they're like, hey, if you know somebody, call us, or send us a letter. And me and my sisters are like, dude, what the fuck? We're like, hey, we know somebody, we're looking at my neighbor, and my neighbor's like, she's kind of like picking up the fucking signs, sitting here watching this fucking show with a 10, 11, 12-year-old. Or whatever the fuck. And so
it's weird enough in its
yeah.
itself.
Yeah. The fact that 11,
hey kids,
yeah.
I'm glad you're here. Hey, we were just getting ready to watch Intervention.
Yeah. The fact that like an 11, 12, and a 13-year-old like pick up the concept of the TV show and understand what's going on is pretty fucking bizarre. But anyways, we understood fully in its entirety what was happening. And so we're like, whoa, what the fuck? So shit you not. My little sister leaves first, and me and my older sister are in there. We're talking about how to do this, and my little sister comes back in. She's screaming and crying, and so we're like, "What the fuck?" So we go outside. There's a fire in the front yard. Look on the front porch. My mom's boyfriend is standing there. He's got like a wife beater on, white tank top, blood all over the front of his torso. My mom had just stabbed him, attacked him in the bathroom, likely over some drugs. My mom comes storming out of the house. She was so high. She had a broken foot at the time. She was so high. She's like storming and running around on this foot, like stomped, like it was fucking swollen and green and nasty. And she's screaming and yelling, and there's a fire in the front yard. There's blood all over her boyfriend. And immediately, me and my sisters, we fall down, and we just are in this hysterical panic. We're screaming and crying and begging and pleading, like, what the fuck is going on? Cop pulls up, comes out, grabs my mom, throws her in the back of the car. I was 12 years old when that happened, and I can remember being out in the street and just looking at my mom in the back of that car and thinking, like, I just wanted my mom, I just wanted my mom. Like, it didn't matter all the bullshit that I had been through. I just wanted her, and I loved her, and I just wanted her. And, a few minutes later, the cop comes by, gets in the car, and takes her away. This is all very, very long and complicated. It would take me entirely too long to tell the details of it all. But basically, we go back inside. From that point forward, for the next 4 to 6 months, I bounced around several houses. So I lived with my dad for a brief moment, got into a lot of trouble, moved in with some other people. They said they couldn't take care of me. Moved in.
Had a relationship with your dad kind of been reestablished a bit before that, after he got out of the joint? Or?
No, he was like randomly called. I don't even know how the fuck he knew what was happening. Like, I just remember him showing up, and I was like, what the fuck? It was like this crazy, like all these people just started showing up at my house.
Back to the life that was behind after he got released, or something along those lines.
Well, yeah, I mean, when that happened with my mom, people just started calling people, I guess, and somehow my dad ended up showing up. I don't know how. Like, I don't know how he was called and how my grandparents weren't called initially. Like, it's just thinking about it was fucking crazy. Like, all these like random people showed up at my house and like, who's gonna take the kids? And everybody's like, yeah, we'll take them. So, anyways, I bounced around like 4 or 5 different houses for about the next 6 months. And just a little bit more context on that. I was 12 years old, no mom and dad, living with random people, just like surviving somehow. I was calling schools, telling schools like, hey, I got to transfer over here now because of this and this. And I don't know how the fuck I was getting by. I don't remember. I know that people were cooking me meals. I would wake up and there would be dinner, and I would go to sleep, wake up, go to school. Like, it was fucking, like, most kids these days, 10, 11, 12 years old, won't wake up to an alarm clock. And I was just like getting up, going to school, coming home, doing homework. I was just taking care of myself. It was crazy.
At this point in time, are you kind of detached from that area that you grew up in, that same kind of neighborhood or that same section of the city, or are you still pretty close by?
Still close. Yeah. Lima's like,
Is there
Lima.
still any visitations going on over to the other house with Mondo and those guys out by that
Oh,
point, or
yes.
is that all shut down?
Yes. So the only constant throughout that whole process was Mondo. Everywhere I would go, I would tell him where I was at, and he would come and pick me up, and he would take me to his house on the weekends. And so this is a really twisted part about sexual trauma. So statistically speaking, over 90% of the time, like 92% of the time, I think it's somebody within your immediate circle of trust. Okay. So it's either in your house or family members or coaches, somebody that you trust. Over 78% of the time, it's somebody in your house. So, like mom, dad, brother, sister, uncle, or not even uncle, fucking somebody in your house. What makes sexual trauma and, oddly enough, combat PTSD or PTSD that first responders experience, what makes it so bad is that there's a bunch of good memories with this person and there's a bunch of bad memories with this person, or there's one bad memory in particular. So likely the person that taught you how to throw the football, ride the bike, feeds you cereal in the morning is the same person that's been molesting and raping you for years. Okay. So there's all these jacked up memories that are all put in one box and you can't get rid of them. Same thing with combat PTSD, right? You go to war and you're talking shit and playing spades with your buddies for 6 months and then all of a sudden he's dead. Okay. So whenever you think about fucking deployment and you're thinking about your fucking buddy, and you love him and you miss him and man, this guy was fucking awesome. And then there's this like horrible memory that pops up of when he died, And so that's what makes sexual trauma and combat PTSD so similar, is that there's good and bad mixed in. And not to get too far down the rabbit hole, but oddly enough, victims of like rape oftentimes recover extremely quickly because it's a singular moment that was very bad. Therefore, they can kind of dump that. They can process it and dump it, and it's gone.
It's a personal connection.
Yeah, there's no like good time, bad time. It's like this one bad moment and it's gone. And now we can like process it and get it out of our head and figure it out, That's what, so anyways, sexual trauma, combat PTSD, they're very, very tough to navigate because that person who hurt you or is a part of the bad memory is a very good memory as well. And I say all that to say, Mondo, although he was the worst thing that ever happened to me, he was arguably one of the best things that ever happened to me. Because he was a mentor. He was like this constant guiding light. I mean, I say this truthfully. He gave me so much knowledge and mentoring through the hardest parts of my life. If it wasn't for him, I don't know where I would have been. Like, I don't know what I would have done. Like, because I was at his house on the weekends, I wasn't running around doing dumb shit, which like, there's like this odd, piece to it, because he was fucking ruining my life, but on the same token, he really helped me a lot, and so that's what's so fucked up about the whole situation.
It's an insane paradox because
Yeah.
he was instilling a whole bunch of traits in you that were valuable to
Yeah.
your development as a person, but at the same time, he was destroying you psychologically with the abuse.
Exactly, and to say that like he was helpful would be like an understatement. I mean, I'll get into that in a little bit here in a minute, but anyway, so after about 4 or 6 months or so, my grandparents end up finding me. They come and pick me up. I go to their house. My sisters were already there. I didn't know that. And I'm like, holy shit, like we finally reunited. Because this whole time I was bouncing around by myself. I didn't know where my sisters went. I get back. Me and my sisters are like all of a sudden reconnected. And my grandparents asked to adopt us. I said yes. My sisters said no. And they go back and live with my mom. And they were manipulated, deceived, all of the things, okay? I'm with my grandparents, and I tell my grandparents I got this friend I want to hang out with. His name's Mondo, and so my grandparents are like, what the fuck? No, like, we're not doing that. My grandparents are really good people. My grandpa retired from Ford, and my grandma ran her own business. And so when I got to their house, like we had a fucking finished basement to ourselves, like backyard pool, like fucking 2 nice cars, clothes. Like I was like, bro, we're good.
Just out of curiosity on that, kind of bringing that in, where were they during the kind of
Yeah.
previous 10 years
Yep.
of everything sort of dissembling with your mom and all?
Yeah. So they had tried to get us our entire childhood. I mean, they tried to protect us. They tried to save us our entire childhood, and that's where my mom told us what happens in our house stays in our house because of my grandparents. Because I would tell my grandparents what was happening, and then my mom would beat the shit out of me for doing that. So they had been trying to protect us and save us this whole time. And with the powers that be and the child protective system, it's almost impossible to steal it, or not to steal, but to take a child out of a bad situation.
That's
Oh, no.
correct.
Wrong way to
Yeah,
say
I've
that.
actually.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, and I've had conversations like this with people many times, and I've told them in those kinds of situations, and this is more as an advocacy for fathers who try to fight for their children in situations where there's an unstable mother who decides to get a divorce or she's abusive to the spouse. Even under those kinds of circumstances, even if spousal abuse from the woman to the man has been proven, unless that woman has been actually caught in multiple situations of violence to where the child has actually been hospitalized and the violence has been shown, proven, recorded, or has been through like multiple imprisonments or jailing, substance abuse or rehabilitation programs, it is dang impossible to get a child away from their biological mother. It is real.
well, it's
So I know exactly what you're saying then, and of course back on the front side of the millennium, it was harder than it is now. So
well, it's a fucked situation all the way around. A lot of people ask me like how I didn't end up in foster care, and it's probably better that I didn't end up in foster care. Over 70% of kids in foster care will be sexually abused, molested,
absolutely,
assaulted.
sexually abused,
Yeah,
physically
probably
abused, quite
trafficked.
often by the other foster kids.
Yeah, I mean, you have we had a set of foster parents down here in Georgia who adopted 2 boys, began to rape them, and then tried to sell them, traffic them, and they were arrested for that. But 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. So it just goes to show like the whole system is fucked. The world is like actively trying to fucking ruin our children, and it's fucking heartbreaking. Anyways, so my grandparents get me. They asked to adopt me. They find out about Mondo. They say no to him initially, and then because of who I am and because of the situation, I defend him. I convince my grandparents to meet him. They like him, and I'll try to wrap this up because we're dragging on the story part of it, and we'll get into the other parts of it next. But long story short, the abuse continues. Okay, I was 13 years old when my grandparents' adoption went through, and I continued to go to Mondo's house for about 2.5 more years. I was a month away from being 16 years old. I was up at his house, and I had a younger friend that was with me, and Mondo had made a comment towards my younger friend. And the comment was, if you're having a bad day, I can take you back in the bed and blow you. Now, when he said this, the reason why it was so, I mean, that's crazy enough, right? But Mondo would say that shit about me in front of other adults. He would say it in front of like we had these like other outside adult group friends. We had about 2 or 3 adult friends or families that we would hang out with, and he would make those comments about me as I was hanging out with him throughout the years. He would say, hey, it's time for us to go. Seth's gonna blow me, or I gotta go back and blow Seth tonight, or I gotta go fuck Seth tonight, or Seth's gonna whatever the fuck, whatever, we're gonna go back and do this. And he would make these comments literally about fucking me or molesting me to these other adults, and everybody would just laugh it off. And these things were happening. Like, by the time I was 13 years old, I had experienced every sexual encounter that you can have with somebody. I had, it was hands, oral, the reciprocation of oral sex. He would perform it on me. He would eventually convince me to do it to him. But when I was 13 years old, that was the first time he raped me,
And not a single one of these other men at any point during all this never even hinted at that's a fucked up thing to say about a kid that
makes you wonder, man. No, nobody said anything. Nobody stood up and tried to protect me. Nobody said like, hey, like that's not fucking cool. Like don't say that about him or what.
No, I
Nobody
mean,
pulled me aside and
the,
was
the
like, hey,
circles of
Seth.
people I was always with, of course, and I guess the young adult age group. If somebody said some shit like that, there would have been offense quickly. Like somebody would be like, "Dude,
Well,
you're
and,
fucking
and, and here's the
crazy."
thing, birds of a feather flock together, right? So it
That's
makes
the
you
only
wonder
thing that I
what.
can think of about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a way of him testing the water. Okay, when people are fucked up, they'll say fucked up shit around you to test the water. Okay, if I'm like a blatant racist, I might come around you and drop the word one time and just see how you react. Hey, how you going? And if you don't react, it's like okay, he's cool with that, and then I can keep going and keep going, and now I can just do whatever the fuck I want to do because you've already let it happen, and
Right.
that is the psychological fucking warfare that they are not only grooming this child, they are grooming everybody in their life, like everybody who's around them, and they're just dangerous people, and so he would make those comments about me, and so that night when he made that comment about my friend. I knew he wasn't joking. We laughed it off in that room, but I was like, "Fuck this, dude." And long story short, I end up telling, I end up messaging Jacob, the kid who introduced me to him. I end up messaging Jacob that night on a video game, and I said, "Hey, I need to talk to you tomorrow." So I was a month away from being 16. Okay, this was a Saturday night. This whole thing happens. This kid goes back in the bed with Mondo. That's the first time I remember anybody else going back there with him. Short time afterwards, they come out. That night, I go back to bed, and I was raped again that night. Um, I know we kind of glossed over that whole situation, but um, you
You
know,
just feel free to share it as you're comfortable sharing it, man. You don't have to.
yeah,
It's all
and
on you, man.
yeah, and I'm an open book too. So like any questions, it's not gonna like I speak the way that I speak because most people can't, and I take that burden of responsibility to educate and inform people. So I'm okay with anything. But the first time he raped me, I was 13 years old, and I remember the whole thing like it was yesterday, and I can remember like going back and sitting on the toilet when he was done and just crying on that toilet, like getting shit out of my body, and just heartbroken that I didn't have a mother, didn't have a father, had just been raped. And this goes into why you don't report, okay? At this point, I was so terrified of having HIV or AIDS or some disease, or if I say something, people are going to think I'm gay. They're going to think something's wrong with me. They're going to have all these questions like, why would I do that? Why would I be a part of that? And so at this point, by not reporting, I was protecting Mondo, but I was also protecting my own identity, because if you report it, man, you got to tell people what happened to you. Otherwise,
Right.
it's a liar. They can't do anything about
Absolutely.
it. So there was so much embarrassment and shame that I could not tell anybody what I had done.
Well, there's a
And
certain amount of, like I'm sure you said you're a football
yeah,
kid growing up. You're trying
yeah,
to be an athlete. You're trying to be part of the masculine crew.
yeah,
You're hanging out with those dudes. So there's also a certain amount of like dudes don't get raped. Like
yep,
that's not a thing, right? Especially if you're
Yeah.
hanging out in the locker room
yeah.
and talking with those guys. So like all of that piles on top of it.
Dude,
I can
it's
imagine.
man. And so yeah, it's funny you say that. We'll get into that here in just a minute. So fuck, did I lose you guys?
Nope,
Nope,
you're
you're
still
still
My
here.
here.
fucking screen drops. My HDMI cable's fucked up. Anyways, so he makes that comment toward my friend, and I tell Jacob, "Hey man, I gotta talk to you tomorrow." Okay, go back to his bed that night, Saturday night. He ends up raping me again, and Sunday comes around. Mondo takes us home. He drops me off first. He goes drops off the other kid. Now Jacob shows up to my house a couple hours later, and I'm in my bedroom pacing back and forth. Can't really say it out loud. I just like couldn't tell him. I could not get the words to come out of my body of what had happened to me because you have all the fear of denial, rejection, all of those things are it's very real. And Jacob kind of breaks the silence and he says, "Mondo touched you, didn't he?" And at this point, Jacob's like in college. Jacob's like drinking, hanging out with girls on the weekend, like he's doing all this shit. And I look at him like he's a fucking hero of mine. And he says, "Mondo touched you, didn't he?" And I fall down on the floor, I start crying. Obviously, it's a yes. And after a few minutes, he breaks the silence again. He says, "He did it to me too." And I turn and I look at him and I'm like, what the fuck, man? Because like Jacob is like my big brother. He's like a father figure to me. He's like a man who just this doesn't happen to the most toughest fucking coolest guy you know. It does not happen to him. And so, yeah, sure as shit, I did. And so he says, well, what do you want to do? He's like, do you want to keep it a secret or do you want to report the guy? And I was like, fuck this guy. Like, we're fucking reporting him. So we go out. We tell my grandparents. That's a whole heartbreaking moment in its own. We go to the hospital. We do the rape kit.
Can I? I'm very interested to know
Yeah.
how your grandfather reacted specifically. Could you talk about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, so initially he came out there, I was crying, and my grandparents were like, what the fuck is going on? Like, they're clueless, okay. And I can't say it again. And so Jacob breaks the silence and he says, it's Mondo. And as soon as he says that, my grandma actually, to this day, it's very hard. This is the only part that gets me choked up most of the time. Is she just says like, my baby, like, oh no. And she begins to just cry and cry and cry. Okay. And I go over there and I hug my grandma and I'm just so fucking sorry because I had defended the guy and I brought the guy in our house and he was in our holidays, our Christmases, Thanksgivings, like all of this shit. Like everybody fucking knew him. And he was, so sitting there holding my grandma, she's crying and I feel fucking horrible. My grandpa was very pissed off, to his credit, he did not go overboard. Since you asked, we ended up going to the hospital, and he was like you could tell he was very upset. I remember him. I could just remember the tone of his voice. I don't remember what he said, but I know he was very mad, like very angry, like a man would be. But we go to the hospital, and Mondo actually showed up at my house while we were at the hospital, which he never showed up at my house unannounced, which makes me think that he knew something was up and he was coming back to, I don't know what he's going to do, but he's 6'5", 380 pounds. I'm rather convinced he knew what was happening and he was coming back to kill us or attack or something to that effect. So knowing what I know now, my grandpa, had he been home and me and my grandma would have went to the hospital, he would have absolutely, without any doubt, murdered the man. He would have shot and killed him right there in our fucking driveway, But my grandma was home and long conversation, but basically told him that, Seth wasn't home. And so Mondo left. But I was at the hospital. And I mean, to answer your question, my grandpa didn't like fly off the handle. He didn't like get crazy or nothing like that. He was very composed. He was angry, but he was very composed, which is, says a lot about him and his character because I know a lot of guys, and I would caution them saying this is, if anybody ever did that to my kids, I'd fucking murder. They go into this like tangent of like how tough they are about their kids. And while that's understandable and honorable, it prevents reporting. Okay, if you have 4 kids, 4 boys, you said, if any one of your boys, if something was happening and they knew because their father has said it out loud that their father would murder the person who hurt them or whatever, some extreme reaction, they are less likely to tell you because they don't want to lose their dad and they don't want their dad to be scared. They're so scared of that reaction. They don't want to see their father in that light. So people get scared of reporting because they don't want their parents to be upset. They don't want their parents to be mad at them. They don't want their parents to go and what's the only thing worse than something happening to your boys is something happening to your boys and then losing their father because of that incident as well, So that's my caution to men out there, especially when they speak on this stuff, because it's easy to sit here and be like, oh, I would fucking murder this guy. Like, yeah, those things sound great, but you're preventing somebody from reporting. And the only thing worse than that happening to your child is that your child is raped and molested or whatever, and now their parent is gone. And not only that, but it comes out as, headline, man kills, daughter's rapist. And so now the whole fucking world knows without any fucking regard, So thankfully my grandpa, nobody reacted like that. And when I reported the guy, it didn't hit the news. No media outlet fucking caught it because I was a minor, so they couldn't say my name anyways. But given the circumstances, had it made some crazy national headline or whatever the fuck, it would have circled back to me one way or the other. It's just how it works. So we get to the hospital. Officer walks in, do the forensic interview with the officer. I have to tell this man everything that had happened to me over the last 5.5 years. And he tells me, hey, Seth, the more you tell me now, the less we have to talk about later. And so his name's Chad Couples, that officer I talked to. I actually got to go up to Ohio in November and speak at a conference, oddly enough, in my hometown. First conference I've ever spoke at a conference in my hometown, and Chad Couples was there, and I was able to present him an award for the way he handled that day. See, now I'm getting emotional. But the way that he handled that day, he had just taken the sexual assault training stuff a few weeks prior, and that was his first ever sexual assault case that he had ever handled in his career. And he walked in there and fucking knocked it out the park. He was perfect with me. He handled me with he just did very well with me, getting everything he needed to get. He drove up to Bluffton, Ohio, arrested Mondo, took him into custody. They actually got a confession out of him before they took him into custody, which is a really big deal, because once they go into custody, now they can get a lawyer and all those things, right? But they got him to admit to some level of guilt before they even arrested him. On camera with video, which is really remarkable. So a lot of kudos to Chad. He's actually in my book. I put him in the acknowledgments in the end. There's a picture of me and him in the book as well. But Chad Couples, he's always going to be a part of my story, so I always say his name.
I'm really glad to hear a story where we venerate the good police officers out there that do their job correctly and are protecting and serving, because that's
Absolutely.
a big deal.
And dude, it sounds like
I'm
he
glad
was in a spot he should have been, and being able to handle the situation he did as somebody who was so new to it.
Yeah,
sounds like that was a hell of a calling for him. It's an alignment from God.
What's fucking crazy is Chad's wife was my teacher when I was in second and third and fourth grade or some shit. And so when he walked in the fucking hospital, I was like, Couples? I was like, is your wife Mrs. Couples? And he's like, yeah. And I had actually met Chad maybe 4 or 5 years prior on Veterans Day or whatever. He came in on Veterans Day or Memorial Day because he served in Iraq as an MP and had a fucked up deployment. And so he would always come to the schools and talk to kids, And the more I've learned about Chad, our similarities are rather incredible. He served in Iraq and then got out, became a cop, and then met him as a young man. He was the one who fucking reports to my case, which is just fucking insane. And then I got to go back and find Chad, fucking 15 years after the fact. Earlier this year, I finally made contact with him. And, when I called him, I left a message for him and he called me back. And he said, hey, this is Chad Couples. And I hadn't talked to this guy in 15 years. And I was terrified. I was so scared to talk to him because I was like, I don't want to piss him off. I don't want to trigger something, whatever. And he says, hey, this is Chad Couples. And I said, hey, this is Seth Gehle. Do you know who I am? And he's like, fuck yeah, I remember you. And I'm like, what the fuck, dude? And I'm like, Chad, I told him, I said, man, I'm so thankful for you, man. I was like, I am, I know you remember that day. And, I said, hey, I'm married now and I've got a wife. I've got 2 beautiful kids and I've had an incredible career and I'm writing a book now and I want you to be a part of this story and all this shit, And it was just this really wholesome moment to get to meet him and then go back to Ohio, present him an award that he knew nothing about.
That's incredible.
It was fucking amazing. And
phenomenal.
And Chad's had a fucking crazy career as a police officer. He's got a lot of crazy stories I got to see him tell. So anyways, he goes up, arrests him. The next day, I kind of just go on about my life. As a young man, I kind of was just packed it away and kept moving. Oddly enough, I never went to therapy. I never went to crime victim services. I never sat down with a doctor to tell me that I was depressed and had BPD and anxiety and all these other fucking diseases. Nothing ever happened to me. I kept it moving. 17 years old, came around. I joined the Army. I went split option. So I went to basic between my junior and senior year. Went through the AIT, the job portion of the training. Afterwards, And I initially signed up to be a chemical equipment repairer, which I don't know what the fuck that does. But I thought that everything was like infantry. And, the recruiters walked in and were like dangling the fucking dog tags and like, hey, man, you want to fucking shoot guns and whatever? I'm like, fuck yeah, man.
Kill people, not get in trouble for it. I said, fuck yeah, who don't?
Yeah, exactly, dude. Yeah, bro. And so I thought that when I joined the military that because this was all still a secret, everything that had happened to me was a big secret. I didn't tell anybody. And so I thought that when I joined the military, truthfully speaking, I was like, this is going to get me a lot of pussy. Like that's what my thoughts were, right? I was like, and little did I know.
What year is this?
2012.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I was like, fuck yeah, bro. Like, yeah, I'll do it. And so like Seth's going to basic training, and while I was in basic, like all the girls from high school are sending me letters and all these cheerleaders, and I'm like, fuck yeah. And I get back.
Thought was gonna happen, or that?
No, that did happen. So when I was in basic, I was like, hey, yeah, and I was this little motherfucker. I was a fucking shitbag, And so fucking I get out of basic. I'm in the reserves at this point. I had no idea what the fuck the reserves were. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. So anyways, a couple years go by in the reserves, like a year, maybe two. And I was about to be homeless because I had no financial literacy, none of this bullshit. So I join, I go active duty, and I join the infantry. And so now I really think I'm about to get laid because I'm in the infantry. Like I got the blue cord. I'm about to be running and gunning and killing. And I show up to like Fort Stewart, Georgia, and I guess it never dawned on me that a military installation has like a fucking 1,000 other men just like me. And all the girls that live around there, I'm just like another fucking turd with a uniform on.
You're just there. You are. You're just walking down the street. Your combat boots, your grunt style T-shirt. You're like, oh, I'm gonna get so much pussy at the bar tonight. You walk in. Everybody's dressed just like you. There's not a girl to be seen. Y'all wearing the same haircut.
Bro, you know what's really bad? Is like
you set your Blackhawk backpack down by the door.
Yeah, bro. Like I was painting these scenes in my fucking head that were just a false narrative. But I'm so glad I didn't make some key mistakes because I almost got my dog.
Got your name tag and U.S. Army Velcroed on the front of it, just in case. You want everybody to know.
Yeah, bro.
In case they hadn't figured it out already.
Bro, I almost got my dog tags on my chest.
You're just surreptitiously flashing your CAC for the bartender just to make sure you get that 10% discount, dude.
Bro, I just wanted people to know. Like, yeah, I mean, I wanted everybody to know. And when you're at Stewart, like down in Georgia, you go down to Tybee Beach all the time. And so like I wanted to get all these like army tattoos so people would know that I was like in the army, and thankfully I didn't do any of that shit because everybody fucking down there had them. Anyways, it took me probably 6 months to realize like I'm not special. Like everybody's the fucking same here.
Remind me when we're done. We're wrapping up. I have a hilarious army tattoo story.
Oh, okay.
That'll make you feel a little bit better.
Yeah, good.
One on his butt cheek.
Not that one. That's another one.
Well, so I'll wrap up the story, I guess. So when I joined the military, there were a lot of reasons why I joined. Stability and like brotherhood, and part of it was suffering. Part of it was like I had already been through so much shit. Like I want to go back and get into more shit. I wanted to like go to war. I did want to go to war. I did want to fight, and I wanted to do that because like. It sounded miserable and hell-like, and I wanted to feel it. I was so used to and accustomed to the pain that I was just like, put me back. I want to get into all of it. I want to be the most traumatized fucking person in the world at this point. Like I just wanted it all. So that's kind of why I joined, and I ended up going to the 82nd Airborne Division, fucking doing all that bullshit. Went to.
When were you there?
2017 to 2021.
Dog, we have passed each other on our dens.
Yeah.
You and I have 100%. You and I, we have definitely seen each other face to face and just never knew it.
Right. Yeah, I was in 1 Fury, 1508.
Yep, I know exactly where you're at, dog.
Yeah. So, go to Bragg, and
that's right. It is Bragg.
Yeah, well, yeah. I don't know what the fuck it's called. What is it called
It's
now?
brag. No,
Okay,
it's
brag.
brag.
Okay, so I'm at brag, and oddly enough, like, dude, that was fucking hard because brag is very clicky and very like fraternity like, and I didn't realize that. So when I got there, I actually struggled to fit in with everybody there. And I was struggling bad. Like I was going through a massive identity crisis. I had just gotten promoted to sergeant, so I was a team leader. We're going to Afghanistan. I have to lead all these guys. I was like dealing with all this shit of like I was just this very young, aggressive bulldog of a team leader, and the reality of it is I was just insecure. I was insecure about everything that I had been through, mostly the sexual abuse stuff. I could tell anybody that my mom was a crackhead and that she was abusive. Like that shit don't got nothing to do with me. But I couldn't tell anybody that I had been sexually abused, molested, raped, all of those things, because that's just it doesn't happen, right? So, crazy enough, go to Afghanistan, come back. At this point, I had been married for I don't know, fucking quite a while, several years, long
Did you
enough.
do it at all while you were over there?
No direct action, just IDF, and I'm so thankful for that. Like I wanted, it's funny, going to Afghanistan. Like I was like, yeah, fuck yeah, like let's go, like we're gonna get into this shit. And as soon as I got over there, I was like, fuck this. I was like, dude, I just want to get home because my daughter was 9 months old. And so I just wanted to get back home, man. Every fucking night, I was just like, I just want to get back home.
It's one of the things that I tell the young guys. Going to war sounds really cool
Yeah.
until you do it.
Yeah.
And then it's a lot less cool. And once you check, because I mean, we all were that young, private specialist, young sergeant in the Army at one point,
Yeah.
where you're slick sleeved and you haven't been there yet. You don't have the things to show it, and then it's like you're not part of the crew, right?
Right.
You can get your combat infantryman's badge, you can get like your EIB, right? Your expert infantry badge. You can do all the stuff. You can get your ranger tab. You can do the things, but until you have that on the other side, or you have that CIB that says I was there and I did it, right? Are you, it's like the troops look at you a little different, right? Or
Yeah.
at least back when I was coming up in the Army, it was that way, right? Because you knew the dudes that had been there and done it, and then you see especially the young NCOs, it's the hardest on them. And you see those guys that haven't been there, done it yet, and you can definitely see the troops look at the dudes a little bit different, right? And that guy gets just a little more respect because it's real. He's been there. And so, that's hard for a young sergeant. And then everything changes when you've been there and you've done it, and then you come back. And I remember when I got my combat patch and I came back, and I remember like the first few weekends that I was home, I was like, okay, well that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's not nearly as cool anymore.
Right.
And then you're just like, oh, all right. And then some of the things that the non-dick NCOs said to you all of a sudden start making sense, and you're like, now I know what they were getting at.
Yeah, and there's this interesting piece with that because much like a lot of senior NCOs who have been through the shit, like especially in the 82nd, where a lot of your staff NCOs or your higher ups are former BAT guys, or they've been in the airborne units their whole career, therefore they've been deployed multiple times, all the shit, right? Mm-hmm. So like a lot of times those guys would look at you and be like, you don't know what it's fucking like. You don't know what it's like, motherfucker, blah, 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 blah. And I would do the same thing to people. I would say, look, motherfucker, you don't know what the fuck it's like. Like, I get it. Like, you got this shit on your fucking chest. Like, let me tell you something that you would not be able to fucking handle. Like, I'm just going to tell you this right now. Like, most people don't handle the situations that I've come from. And so what I've had to do over the years, and I would encourage a lot of military guys to this, especially leaders, is to say, instead of being like, you don't know what it's like, fuck you, you don't have your CIB, or in my situation, you don't know what it's like, you haven't gone through all this trauma that I've gone through. Instead of looking at it like that, because that's a very victim kind of mentality, is look at it like, I am so glad you have not experienced what I have experienced, And even like NCOs that have gone to combat, there is a lot of value that goes into going to combat, certainly. But to hold that over somebody's head, is, in my opinion, is fucking bullshit. And it creates this. It's just very hard. It's already hard enough to be in the military. It's already hard enough to do what you've done. I don't give a fuck what job you have. You're already doing something that most people basically refuse to do. Therefore, give those guys that credit. The guys that have the combat time, that's great. I mean, I'm not taking nothing from you. That is great exposure. All of the things, right? But we shouldn't be holding that over somebody's head. Just as somebody who has been through hell and back in my life as far as trauma goes, I shouldn't hold that over somebody's head to say that I am more or you are lesser than just because of circumstances, okay? But yeah, I did deal with that massively, to your point.
You said something earlier, and it really speaks to your character. But you admitted, you said I was insecure as a young sergeant.
Oh, yeah.
And authority is one of those things where you either have it or you don't. And if you have to continually remind somebody that you have the authority, you don't have the authority. And if you're holding something over somebody's head, then that only speaks to how insecure that you are as a leader, because what that says is without that thing, you don't know how to lead another individual. And so you're relying on the crutch of what you're wearing on your uniform. And it's one of the reasons that I appreciate this in the Marine Corps, to where those dudes, they don't wear the badges and they don't wear the tabs and they don't wear, except for the dudes that do the special operations route, and then they get to wear two, and it's like, hey, they got the bubble and the wings, right? But except for those guys, the Marine Corps just keeps it slick, man. They don't wear combat patches. You get name, Marine Corps, rank. And it's like, I think that they have it very, like, that's a good thing that they do in that, because it's like, regardless, it's like when you wear your entire resume, then it gives you that crutch to fall back on, that now I don't have to study myself approved, to use a biblical phrase, right? Or, become a good leader in the right of being a leader. I can just rely on what I wear on my uniform, and that's my crutch. So that's my little speech on that. But I think that you nailed it, and I really appreciate you being humble enough to say that, because that's a big deal.
Well, dude, I mean, that's what I've done my whole life, man. My whole life, I've worn my trauma like like a combat patch. Like fuck you. I can act however I want to act. I can do whatever I want to do, because of what I've been through, And there's nothing you can tell me. It was like walking around with a tab and a fucking long tab and all this shit. It's like I can do whatever I want because I've
Shoulder
already,
on shoulder.
yeah, I've already been through it, man. Like there's nothing you can tell me, and I perpetuated that as a leader in the military. As soon as I got that sergeant rank, I will say I had the best intentions for everybody. I truly cared and loved my job as an NCO. I think I held a little bit of authority, but I was the bulldog. Like I had a platoon sergeant who just told me to fuck these guys up, and so I did. And that was part of the problem. But there is a place for that guy in the platoon. There is a place for that, for the team leader, the aggressive guy, and I was that guy. And so the guys hate me. Yeah, they did hate me. There's some guys that like me, and it is what it is. I did my job the best that I could, the best that I knew how to. But there was certainly a lot of insecurity that I dealt with.
Don't get me wrong. What I'm saying, the military's job is to close with and kill the enemy.
Yeah.
You're supposed to break things and kill people, right? And so this isn't the Boy Scouts, and not everybody gets a participation trophy. And if you want to have feelings, go have those on your own time. We're here to do a job together as a team and get it done. And you pull your weight, you put the team first, you go out there, you close with, you kill the enemy. It's a hard business that we do, and it requires men to do it. And so it's like being hard on your Joes and getting the best performance out of them and giving them that purpose, motivation, and direction. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, if you can't do that without falling back on, you will do what I say because I have this, then you need to go back and study your leadership manual a little bit better. That's what I'm getting at. I'm not saying, to mollycoddle your Joes. That's not what I mean at all. In fact, I'm hoping with the new Secretary of Defense, and this is completely and totally my opinion and is not representative of any other entity, I'm hoping with the incoming Secretary of Defense, the military is going to start heading in a direction, in that direction again, where it's like, this is our business, and if it doesn't increase lethality inside of our organization, then we don't have time for it.
yeah, and
I
I
did
got
want to clarify my
yeah.
statement on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I got, and I mean, truthfully, I was just kind of trying to hammer on the fact that I did care deeply, but I made a lot of mistakes, and I had a lot of insecurities due to the nature of my childhood and things like that. And when I got back from Afghanistan, it got really bad. It got really dark. I really driving on Chicken Road every day to work. I would count the trees and figure out which one I was going to drive into, and
Well, definitely not right there where Chicken and Preacher Road veer off of each other. That would not be a good spot to go.
yeah. Thank you for the insight. I could have used that. Could have used that 6 years ago or whatever the fuck. Anyways, yeah. So yeah. I mean, I was struggling bad, and um, uh, post deployment, my son was born. So I came home like mid deployment because my grandma passed away, and um, oh, kind of glossed over this too. So when I reported the guy, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. He abused me and a good friend of mine for about 10 years, and he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. That was in 2011. In 2019, I was in Afghanistan, and that's when he died. So he died about a year before he was supposed to get out of prison. I only that year will always be with me because that's the year I went to Afghanistan. That was the year that he died, and that was the year that my grandma died. So I came home from my grandma's funeral for a couple weeks, and that's when my son was conceived. So yeah, so it's kind of
For a
funny.
year.
I would fuck with my wife because
Take the good and the bad.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny when I got back to Afghanistan, like a month later, we found out my wife was pregnant, and so my sergeant major was like fucking with me. He's like, "Hey, Gail, I heard you had a good time at home," and I'm like, "Yeah, don't worry about it. I was thinking about you guys the whole time. It's all good." And
Always the jokes.
yeah, so then you get back from a 9-month deployment.
At your grandma's funeral, you dog.
Yeah, I know.
This is
So
for you, Nana.
yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Yeah, there was tears in my eyes when it happened. Don't worry. Um, but when I got back from deployment, it's
That's
like
a terrible
it's
joke.
like yeah, it is. Soldier returns from 9-month deployment to like 5-month pregnant wife, and it's like, wait a minute, let me add that up. So anyways, I fucked with my wife about that for a while.
All the
Um,
jokes, yeah.
yeah, unfortunately, we didn't get that like typical like movie scene return from home because
The soldier comes home.
yeah, we didn't like when the way I've always seen it is like you land and all the families that are there at the fucking hangars and all that. Well, it was COVID, so fucking nobody was there. So we got back and it was COVID, and all the single soldiers had to go out to the fucking woods for 3 weeks, and all the married guys got to go home. And I was like so glad I was married because to get back from a 9-month deployment and then go in the field for fucking 3 weeks, dude, fuck that. So.
That's the 82nd, boys and
Bro,
girls.
fucking A, man. So, anyways, got home, got out of the army, about a year or so after deployment, year and a half after deployment. And then I got into the construction industry, fucking crushed it in the construction industry, won some national awards. Um, and the last 3 years I've been out of the army, I've crushed it in that regard. And really when I went out to Las Vegas and won this award, and that kind of really kickstarted the book too. When I was nominated for this award, because I think going through a bunch of hard times and trauma and fucking bullshit sucks, but like a lot of people have that shit, and to go through it, I don't think is inspiring. But like if you do something on the other end of that, like I think that's cool. So that's what I've done since. And I could talk about. I mean, this is a fucking long story, obviously, but there were so many times in my life where things just weren't going my way, even in my marriage. This has been the best year of my life. This year of 2024, hands down, my life has taken a complete 180. 2 years from now, a year and a half from now, I was trying to divorce my wife, trying to leave my wife, and we've been married now for 8, 9 years or something like that, coming up on 9 years, I think. We've got 2 kids. I'm an author, motivational speaker. I've run a bunch of ultra marathons to include a 100-mile race, compete in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, no big deal. I can see him over your shoulder. Up over your
Yeah, yeah. That's like my fucking walking in with the Black Hawk book bag. I just want you guys to know that these fucking $5 medals were from choking out other fucking dads at a local jiu-jitsu tournament.
Nice,
That's
nicely
right.
done.
Yeah.
I am surprised you're not doing the super author flex though, with the book like staged up behind you.
I know, like put
There it
back.
is. There
Yeah.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just hang it with a couple pieces of fishing line so it floats next to your
It's
face.
floating. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I got two boxes. I got about 100 copies right here. So,
Well,
Um,
I have some questions now that so there is the story for and that
yeah, long
there's a,
winded.
there's a reason I had to throw some jokes in there because man we really went through the valley there in the middle for a little bit, and that was I don't know if you could see me over here grinding my teeth, but some of the stuff that you said, dude, I was as a dad listening to that. I mean there was some parts of that where that was hard for me to sit through and listen.
There's a lot
to
of
you,
emotion
but
there.
I mean,
anger is, of course, a huge part of it as a parent, but also, I have a very, very heavy tendency to sympathize and empathize with children and the things that they go through, seeing any kind of a struggle for a child, seeing any kind of pain in a child. So hearing the story, it puts a lot there, just as far as trying to imagine the presence, truly.
Yeah.
I did write down a few questions here that I have for you, though, based on the whole story that you went through. And if you have the time to keep going, I'd like to kind of go through some of these if you're cool with it. I'm sure TJ's got some too. But my first question was, and this goes back to the very beginning when you were talking about writing. Did you straight write your book, or did you have any help from like a ghostwriter or do that thing?
Yeah. So good question. Kind of a long story again. I'm not going to get into the fucking
All
semantic.
right, reset the counter 2 hours later. No.
Yeah, exactly. I wrote the first 40,000 words. I attempted to use a ghostwriter, and the ghostwriter was a fucking horrible idea. And so I scrapped everything that they said because they're trying to. It's like if Chris, if I just told you everything that I just said, now I need you to go and write my story. You just wouldn't be able to do it. You'd be like, what the fuck, and. So anyway, so I attempted that because I was like, there's no way I'm going to finish this. I can't write that many words. And so the ghostwriter sent me back a ghost written version of my story, and I scrapped it. I was like, nope, fuck this. So I wrote everything that's in my book was done by me. I did have an editor. I did have a proofreader, but that is purely for grammatical and like sequencing of the story.
Because they didn't teach you how to write too good.
Correct. Yeah, I can fucking do a fucking monthly counseling or whatever the fuck it is, but there's like some NCOER writing process, but I only got like one of those in my career, so.
Nice. You had said when you were talking about you wrote the first section and then deleted it and then wrote it again and deleted it 3 times over. You made the statement that you were trying to minimize your story, and so you didn't want where did the temptation to quote unquote minimize it in your words come from? Was it too hard for you to write, or was it you didn't think people would believe it, or what did you mean by that?
Yeah, so if I asked you, so you'll get this response from civilians all the time, right? I tell them I went to Afghanistan, and they're like, oh, wow, you went to Afghanistan? Like, oh my God, you must have, thank you for your service, and like, you must have seen so much shit. And reality is like my deployment was fucking cush. We had some IDF. We had no direct contact, thank God. Didn't lose anybody. I didn't have to kill anybody. I'm good. Now, while all those things are true, the fact that I went to Afghanistan, it's fucking crazy. Like, people that go to Afghanistan, they go to war, they go to these war zones, it is crazy as fuck. It doesn't matter if you were a fucking cook, unless you were in that one fucking place that has a literal outside dance club. Kuwait, is it? Kuwait, is it? Fucking... That if you went to Kuwait,
I can neither confirm nor deny that there is a swimming pool and a barbecue joint.
If you had a fucking Starbucks,
PX and a Starbucks.
Yeah, if you had a Starbucks and you're talking about your deployment, maybe fuck you. But like, I get it. Okay, you're in an unfamiliar environment. Okay, like
Only if that's where you were and you somehow got your CIB or your CAB because one part of the base on the totally other side got rocketed and your commander made sure that you got your cab because he did. Then
yeah. So what I get it, but so that's kind of what I mean. When I would write my story, I would be like, I would get through it and be like, like nobody gives a fuck. Like it's not that bad. And even now that I have wrote my story in its entirety, when I read my story or even when I tell my story, I don't pick up on how bad it is. But when I read my story or I listen to like a podcast that I was on, like I'll sit back and be like, holy shit, like holy fuck, like that's actually some like really heavy shit, you know? So that's kind of it. It's just the devil, you know, it's the devil. So you're familiar with it. So you're just like, it's not that bad. Like not that bad. You know, you see somebody else's shit and you just wouldn't want to go through their shit, you know? So that's kind of how I looked at it.
I assume timeline wise, you kind of also had to condense to a degree just because the period of abuse was really long, brother. I mean,
Well, yeah. And that, like I said, we've been talking for 2 hours, I think. And you can't cover 30 years in 2 hours. I can't cover 16 years in 300 pages, you know?
Yeah.
So there's so much that I could put into the book, but at some point, it just becomes like this repetitive stories of abuse, which can be just too much to read. So you have to pick a few key points and move on to the good things.
Stick to the highlights or the lowlights, as it were.
Exactly.
Well, in the particular situation, of course, with Mondo and everything there, and the weekends, it's kind of a routine anyway.
Exactly.
It's kind of like being. I mean, it's as sad as it is to run a comparison. It's just kind of like getting up, going to school. The same pattern all the time, so the same story is being told.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a question that I kind of had prepared for you tonight, and just generally getting up on your story before you coming on. But with the amount of trauma and abuse, and you did talk about PTSD and how PTSD for sexual abuse and for those that have been in combat are very similar, and kind of just looking at everything that you've been through, but also what you've been able to accomplish in spite of all of that. There's an atmosphere today of people trying to claim trauma and claim PTSD, you know, this whole idea of like, I need a safe space or I'm triggered, and you'll hear people talk about microaggressions and things like that, when you know for a fact, and I'm not belittling, let me couch this by saying I'm not belittling anybody that has been through actual trauma. I'm not. But we all know for a fact that there are people, and it's often the very, very vocal people online that are doing the whole look at me, and trying to claim trauma or post-traumatic stress of some kind that we largely know just didn't go through it, right? And they're just trying to claim it. What would you say to people like that from your standpoint and your experiences? Because obviously you've been through some hell on earth, and you've been able to come out the other side of it, and you're making something out of it. You're using your trauma and you're becoming successful in spite of it. What would you say to people like that?
So here's the thing. Like I said, as I capped off my story, okay, everybody has adversity. Everybody, you will face trauma or a traumatic event or some level of adversity at some point in your life. It's just going to happen. So, that's not impressive. Okay. I'll speak about one of my mentors. His name is Nick Lavery. He's a current Green Beret. Yeah. You probably know who he is.
Very, very familiar with Nick.
Okay. So Nick, one of the best people I've ever met in my life. Nick lost his leg. Nick went back to the ODA and fucking deployed as an above the knee amputee as a Green Beret. That and what he did in that is inspiring. The fact that he got shot and lost his leg, it's traumatic. It's tragic. I don't know that is inspiring. And don't get my words twisted here. People die, people get shot, people get injured all the time. I don't know that the act of that is inspiring. What they do on the other end of it, I think, is what is inspiring. So to the people out there that are like clip farming and like trauma, they're just addicted to their trauma for the sake of... So the cancel culture is what's doing this. if I get on here and you say, Seth, that didn't happen to you, now I can just say, fuck you. You have to believe me. How dare you doubt me and all of my trauma? And the thing is, I don't even have to defend myself. There's gonna be like 1,000 people that'll jump in the comments and be like, how can you say that? What you just said is a very good question, and a very hot topic, because so many people will jump on that and be like, you need to believe them and everything they say. Well, just today there was just a girl who came out, who supposedly was raped by an entire like hockey or lacrosse team 20 years ago, and it was all a fucking lie.
From the Duke lacrosse team back
Yes.
in 2006.
Yeah, dude, and she just came out and said it was a fucking lie. And so it's like, and look, man, if things happen to you, I'm sorry, and that's fucking tragic. Like, we get it. But what makes me different, and I guess because I just had somebody reach out and ask me a couple questions of like why I tell my story, how I got to the point of where I'm at writing a book and all this other shit. And I said to this person, I said, what have you done in your life that would inspire somebody? Because me being raped as a 13-year-old boy is not inspiring. It's just not. Like, nobody's going to look at me and be like, man, I want to be just like Seth. It's like, yeah, it's fucked up, right? Like, nobody's going to look at me and be like, man, that's awesome. And I don't want to lose my fucking leg. I love Nick, but I'm cool with both my legs. I'm not going to chop my fucking leg off just to be inspiring, okay? Like, I love Nick. He's awesome, but I'm cool with that. Like, I want both my legs, okay? So the thing is what you do on the other end of it is the message. The trauma is not the message. And so when people see my story, that's one of the more frustrating parts, is that people see it as like a sexual abuse victim story. And it's not. My story is about adversity. It's about resilience. It's about overcoming. It's not about being like, oh, hey guys, look at my trauma. Look at my fucking trauma. None of my shit says that. And now when I first started sharing my story, I probably was a little cringe on some things. I probably was a little bit like clickbaity. And then I had to realize like, okay, that's not who I am. Because I've seen people that get on social media who I've had to unfollow and detach from because all they say is my trauma, my trauma, my trauma. And that's the reason why I compete in jiu-jitsu. That's the reason why I went and ran 100 miles. That's the reason why I fucking wrote a book, is because I wanted to do something that is inspiring, and so
Absolutely.
To the people that are
overcoming adversity, that's impressive.
I mean, there are people that are I literally had somebody message me and said, I don't know if this actually happened to me as a child, but I think it did. And here's the thing, man. You can literally build. This is like pathological liars, right? They will literally develop stories in their mind that they believe to be true, and they will remember these things. Like it is a vivid memory in their head because they've told themselves that it happened. And this whole like trauma thing is so popular now. That's why I fucking hate the word trauma. It's like there's like these buzzwords, being narcissistic abuse. Like that's another big one. I don't even know what the fuck narcissistic means. And I don't think anybody else does either. But people are using this environment of cancel culture to come out and speak their truth, they call it, just so everybody fucking jumps on their fucking ass and says, hey, we're so sorry for what you went through. And I think there's a level of empathy and compassion to be had for people. But at some point, it's like, all right, guys, like, what are we doing here? Like, are we just going to cry every fucking day? Or are we going to get the fuck over it and fucking take care of ourselves? I mean, and I'm not.
They want to be told they're brave for getting out of bed in the morning.
Exactly, man. And I'm not. I'm preaching from like a place where I have been there. I have been that guy who has been like, fuck you, I've been through all this shit. And then I had to finally tell myself, like, I am tired of waking up every day like a fucking bitch. And that was it, man. Like, this has been a process. This whole process of me overcoming this shit took about 6 years probably. But it was a repetitive, iterative process of like constantly changing the way I do things to become the man that I am today. So, yeah, I don't know if I answered the question. You got me.
There was one thing that you said that really stuck out to me, and that was you said how people can become addicted to their trauma. And I think the way that you described that really succinctly tied everything up in a bow, because that's really what it is. It's this. We used to venerate achievement in our society. Those that went on, it's like we have the Medal of Honor. Look what that guy did for his country. The Olympic gold medalist. They are the best in the world at doing that. And these are the people that we used to put on pedestals, and we would look up to them. Hey, maybe if you work hard enough, one day too, you could be the president of the United States. Look at these amazing accomplishments that these people were able to do. But then somewhere along the line, and I really started noticing it probably somewhere between 2012 and maybe 2014, where it wasn't the things that people accomplished anymore, and especially in like the online space that people were venerating and idealizing. It was, who's the biggest victim here?
Yeah.
Who can jump down to the bottom the fastest and check the most boxes of how they were victimized or traumatized? And then those people started being pushed to the front. But like you said, it's like you don't have to do anything to become a victim, right? It's like, I'm sorry that happened to you, but in your case, it's like what you achieved in spite of it is what's so inspiring about your story. And yeah, being addicted to trauma, that phrase really stood out to me, because it's like, if you can't find a way to let it go,
yeah, dude,
it just reminds me of the junkie. And
yeah.
it's like, until you can put that needle down and step away from it, you're chaining yourself to the thing that happened, and you're never going to be a free person.
And that's a huge complication in our society. Is a lot of people, not only are there people who truly haven't really suffered anything that try to play the victim role all the time, but beyond that, people who have had some degrees of suffering try to use it to validate every single one of their actions. If they're a shitty parent, it's because of this happening. If they're a junkie, it's because of this happening. If they're in and out of relationships all the time, extremely promiscuous, slept with 700 dudes, it's because, somebody looked at them sideways when they were 12. It's become a trend, basically, and unfortunately, our lovely power of the internet has helped to amplify that, because these victims try to lay their so-called victim testimonials all over every facet of everything. They literally make it the definition of who they are.
Yeah. Dude, I'm telling you, man, I'm 30 years old, man. And, I lived that life for a brief moment, okay? And I don't say what I say with a lack of empathy. I get it. I get where you've come from. I get it, man. You're addicted. You're an alcoholic. Like, if you want to fucking fix yourself, then fucking do it. And I'm just like, if you're listening to this, then fucking do it, man. Like, if you want to fucking lose some weight, then fucking do it. If you want to get better at something, then fucking do it. You want to write a fucking book, then fucking do it. You want to go run a fucking marathon, then fucking do it. You want to be a better husband? One of my best friends, his name's George Hayworth. He told me, because I was about to lose my marriage, okay? He told me, he's like, you know what, Seth? You're so fucking tough, man. We get it. You've been through a bunch of bullshit. We get it. You're a combat veteran. You're a fucking soon-to-be author. You're a speaker, jiu-jitsu, ultra marathons, but you can't even go home and love your wife. He's like, how fucking hard are you? And so I mean, that happened to me about 11 months ago. And when he said that to me, because I told George how much I hated my wife and how much I resented her, because my wife comes from a completely different place than I do, and that she doesn't understand my pain, and she doesn't understand blah, 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 right? All this bullshit. And George is like, bro, that's your fucking wife, man. She's not a fucking dude. She's not the same as you. Get over it. Go home and fucking love her. And so I did. And that was the last piece of my healing. But the point of that is like, bro, I've been there, man. And I read a few books. I read a few books over the course of the last few years. And those few books have fucking taught me more about life than any of this other bullshit. And to talk about being addicted to trauma, there was a fucking girl that I reached out to as a mentor. And what happened to her happened like 20 years ago. Okay? And she's like in her 40s, maybe, I don't know, maybe older than that. And
18.
Yeah. What happened to her happened so long ago. And she posted a video, and this is when I made the realization that people are addicted to it. She posted a video. She's walking down the street and she says, "This is my whatever year anniversary. This is my, whatever the fuck year it was, trauma anniversary." So this thing that we celebrate, maybe like a marriage or a birthday or a whatever the fuck we celebrate, she's celebrating the day of her trauma. It's like, move the fuck on.
No doubt.
Like, who
Yeah, I
the
mean,
fuck wants to think about? Like, I don't walk around every day like, oh yeah, I was raped on 2006 fucking July 13th, and today's my fucking rape anniversary. Like, bro, like that's fucking weird, man. Like, fucking move on, dude. And I did not start sharing my story until I did something that was worth like being inspired about. When people see the things that I do in my day to day life, being an author, motivational speaker now, doing, like I said, doing jujitsu, running ultra marathons, like when people see that, like that's really cool. But when they see the backstory, they're like, oh fuck, like, okay. And the only reason I do what I do now is to show people that like you can go through some fucking horrible things in life and get out on the other end. It's
oh
just,
yeah,
you're going to have to take ownership of the attitude that you possess. I mean, that's just it, dude. You
yeah.
can wake up
No, I
every
think
fucking
that's a
day.
really good mission to be on.
Yeah, I
Sure.
mean, you can wake up every day and be like, man, this is going to be the worst day ever. My life sucks.
Yeah,
Or you can wake up every day with a good mentality. It's like, good. This shit sucks. Good. I'm going to get better. You know?
that's right. Jocko line.
Bro,
So yeah,
Everything.
it sounds to me like what you're preaching is taking responsibility for yourself,
yeah.
and that's and that's incredible. So it takes a certain amount of humility to listen to a brother, especially when they smack you in the face with the truth like that.
Yeah.
And then you not to respond from a place of defensiveness and just be like, F you.
Yep,
You know,
that's usually the
again, you
response.
go back
Fuck
to
you,
what
bro.
you were saying, because you've said it a few times tonight. You're like, "Yeah, I was that guy. I did
Yeah.
that for a while. I made these mistakes as recently as this." But it takes a certain amount of humility to hear that and to get smacked in the face with the truth, and then to take it and use it and like, okay, I'm going to take this and internalize it and use it to make myself better. And it's really hard when it's somebody that you don't like. Because one of
Yeah.
the things that my dad always taught me is just because somebody hates you, or just because they're a hypocrite, or just because they suck at their life, doesn't mean that everything they tell you is wrong. Sometimes somebody will tell you something and it's still right. Even if it's a fucking pig telling you that you stink, you might stink. Just because they're a pig doesn't mean that they're not correct, you know. And
That is
Yeah.
very true.
that's a thing that I've tried to internalize in my life. And what I found is when you can do that, it only ever makes you better. And anytime that you can take something and internalize it and use it to make you better, that person that gave it to you, they still might be, like you said, chained to their trauma. They still might be stuck in their situation, but I'm still moving forward because I was able to take that truth and use it. It's like, I don't know if you're a Bible reader, but a lot of your story kind of reminded me of the biblical character of Joseph. When he looks at his brothers, right? He's sold into slavery and he went through all this stuff, and then he was accused of raping, his master's wife, and thrown in jail and almost killed and all this stuff, and he eventually rises to be the second highest in command of the entire country of Egypt at the time. And he looks at his brothers when they come back and they finally recognize who he is, and he goes, "What you did for my evil, but God meant it for my good." And then look at all the thing. And then Joseph goes on to rescue his father and his entire father's family and the entire nation of Israel back in that time. And so everything that you've gone through and what you've come out of it really reminded me of that biblical character, that you're like, this Mondo demon, which good riddance to him. But everything that he did to you, he meant for your evil, because this guy was a human scum. But you've taken this story, and I can only imagine all of the people that you're going to be able to help get set free from what they're dealing with, because you took responsibility for yourself and you're standing up and you're
You've had the
looking back.
clarity to see the good in those situations.
Exactly.
And you spoke to that in this story, that you saw the good things that came out of the relationship that you did have there, and the things that you needed from some form, even if it was a very fractured and very fucked up form, but from some form of a male role model in your life. with not having one and having a single mother situation in a very abusive household and a constant routine of things that were nothing but detrimental all the time. There was some positives, at least, in that other relationship for a while that you sung a lot of praise to, which takes a lot to take a look into those things in a situation that deep and that traumatic and actually look at the high points of it and how it did benefit your development. That's a pretty phenomenal thing. And truthfully, we're all broken. We all suffer trauma, like you said, and we are all failing constantly, and we learn from those failures. And we have failures even when we feel like we're at the highest points of our life. We continue to fail. So we take the pieces and we try to build something better out of it, and more get broken off, and we just have to continuously improve till the day we die, and hopefully have the luxury and the honor of meeting our maker in the right sense afterward. But right now, it's always a struggle. And I always try to tell people the vast majority of your life are going to be things that you're really not that excited about when you get up in the morning. You usually have things to do that are responsibility-based. They're not fun-based. Life isn't just like I get to do every single thing I dig all the time is the coolest thing in the world. And it's part of what's so bad about our upcoming generations is they have this complacency to where they think they should be able to eat Doritos and Hot Pockets and play video games all day long. And that makes sense to them. Like, oh, yeah, this is what makes me happy, so this is all I should have to do, right? And it doesn't work that way. So it's a difficult thing, brother. But I guess a question I have for you in all of this, because of the mission that you kind of set forward, and because of how things came about for you, as far as the way that you ended up kind of confiding back in a friend, and that sort of being the first step of getting you out of that cycle. If this were to fall on ears of people who are in similar situations of abuse, do you have any form of advice to give them as far as how they can start to break that cycle and feel as if they can get away from the combination of the shame and the hiding and the things that keep victims for so long?
Yeah, so here's the thing that I just had a little bit of enlightenment about recently about shame and embarrassment, okay? So people that are ashamed and embarrassed, they are likely told there's nothing to be ashamed about and there's nothing to be embarrassed about. When I tell my story is incredibly shameful. My story is incredibly embarrassing. And every time I tell it, everybody in the crowd will tell me, hey, there's nothing to be ashamed about. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. You were just a kid. And they got all these fucking reasons, okay? It's embarrassing, okay? There's nothing you can fucking tell me. And the more that we run away from that, the less healing we are going to do, okay? The more we run away from how we felt about a certain situation, the less we are going to be able to get over that shit, okay? So if you've done something shameful as a man and you say, you know what, I'm ashamed of that and that bothers me that I did that, you have accepted what happened and the responsibility of moving the fuck on afterwards, okay?
Absolutely.
I have accepted the fact that the things that I did as a young man with a grown man were very shameful and embarrassing. It's okay. Those are natural human emotions. We become ashamed of things. We get embarrassed of things, okay? It's okay to feel those things, right? It's okay to feel those emotions and to accept those emotions and then move on. But if you try to just bottle it down and be like, oh, I'm not embarrassed, or that didn't embarrass me, or that that wasn't shameful. Now we have this internal battle where we did something or something happened that is what it is, and we are basically denying it for what it is, okay? So to get past shame and embarrassment, just fucking embrace it. Embrace the emotion. Embrace the situation for what it is or what it was. And then get over it. Like, that's how you get the fuck over this shit, okay? If you're stuck in the situation currently, or if you know somebody who is going through abuse, it is a very tricky road, okay? You have to do what is best for you to protect yourself. Like a domestically violent situation between a husband and a wife can be very different between as a child being abused or you think a child's being abused. Domestic violence is a whole nother beast. But there is a level of, finding a trusted advisor or finding like a trusted person that you can contact that can protect you and make you feel safe and escape and report. At the end of the day, you do need to report, okay? So many people don't report because they feel this need to protect somebody. I needed to protect my mom. I needed to protect Mondo. I needed to protect my identity. I needed to protect a lot of things, which is the reason why I didn't say anything about anything. And the reality of it is you don't fucking go anybody anything. The blood is thicker than water. A lot of people say that shit, and people will use that and run your ass into the fucking ground. My own family has done it to me. My own family has tried to take me under because we are family. Okay, family is something that I didn't get to choose. I would love to have it, but because I didn't get to choose it, and the family that I have decided to do what they did, they are no longer a part of my piece of life. Okay, so the people that are going through some pain and suffering, you need to report. There are some victim advocates out there that say, "Hey, you report if you feel comfortable." I'm telling you, you need to report. Like, you need to report. You're going to feel better, and you are going to save somebody else. Had I not reported that guy the time that I did, he would eventually gone to another kid. And what's even crazier about this shit is he ran a haunted house in the hometown in Bluffton, Ohio. He ran a haunted house on Main Street in Bluffton, Ohio, that thousands of kids would go through every year. And he was at the end of it, handing candy to all the fucking kids. So there's no telling how many kids he got to. I know of me and one other for sure. But aside from that, I don't know, and I don't know how many it would have been. So there's a lot. There's a lot to be said there. If you're in a domestic violence situation, my wife arguably was. I never physically harmed her, but the emotional abuse, which pretty much anybody would say is much worse. My wife is an absolute fucking hero of mine for sticking it out the way that she did, because I was manipulated. Everything that had happened to me as a child, I manipulated her. Okay, and so she stuck it out with me throughout all this bullshit for some fucking reason. I don't know why, because she's hot and she can find somebody else, but she fucking did. And so, anyways, to answer your question, you need a report. There are services out there that will protect you and that will save you. There are people, especially nowadays, there are people that will listen to you. And the unfortunate part, kind of like what Chris had said, man, is the people that are fucking beating this thing like a fucking dead horse are the ones that are setting others up for failure. Because it's, when people are embellishing their stories, or it sucks,
service to those who
it is
have really been through it.
And it makes it hard to talk about anything, because like, even when I share my story in a room, I can feel other people trying to get on the level of like intensity. I can see it. I've seen people lie to my face because they're trying to embellish their little bit of whatever the fuck piece of story they want to compare to. I've had people literally embellish their military careers to mine. Yep. And I don't even have a fucking military career that's like worth fucking writing about, So that's the unfortunate part about.
The one-upper is the worst person in every conversation. Don't be that guy.
No doubt.
God damn, dude.
And it's funny what people will try to one-up you on.
Yeah.
You got raped when you were 13. Check this out. You're like, whoa, man, you can have the trophy. I wasn't trying to.
Yeah, dude.
And I'm not making jokes about people that have suffered sexual assault. I never would. It's a terrible trauma, and especially for children. But to the point of like people's military careers, I've been sitting around campfires with people, and the amount of people like trying to like one up somebody, and then inevitably it'll happen where all of a sudden you'll start hearing a dude telling a story, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, I was there with you.
Yeah.
Hold on. You know what I mean? And it's like,
well, that's what I was saying about.
Don't do it. Don't fall into that trap. And I'm saying that as somebody, I'll tell on myself for a little bit. I'm saying that as somebody like you who has been there, and it's like, because I wanted to be one of the boys and be part of it. It's like, oh yeah. Well, this is the one thing happened to me one time when I was, And then all of a sudden, before you know it, you exaggerated a little bit one time. And then the next time, you exaggerated a little bit more. And lucky for me, very fortunate for me, kind of like you had a friend that pulled your head out of your ass. I had a friend that pulled me aside one time at a get-together and just looked at me and, he was like, I've heard you tell that story 3 times, and each time it gets a little better. And he was like, and he straight looked at me and goes, don't fucking lie about your military career, man. He was like, it's not worth it. You've been there, you've done some cool shit. Don't feel like you need to. And I was really thankful that I had a friend call me out on that. And also it was a giant, I had to eat my crow and my humble pie mixed together all at once. And I was like, damn, yeah, you're right, brother. And I'm really glad that he did. It was a small thing. It wasn't like a big deal by any means, but I'm really glad that guy got to me before I started like going down that road. You know what I mean? And it was a big deal to me. So I can understand that. You know what I mean? From both sides, like why people feel the need to want to be a part of the crew. So they, I understand where the temptation comes from.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, again, when you're looking back at other people, you're like, hey man, I was there with you. Like, why are you saying that? It's not worth it. Right. And I'm saying this from the point of somebody that's almost gone down that road before and somebody saved me. So definitely. And to your story, Seth, I think one of the things that makes what you're doing so powerful is the fact that you're inserting, these are the places that I effed up during this whole situation, and how I took responsibility for that too and corrected course, and I'm here now. And that gives you a level of not just authenticity, but a level of authority to speak on that really makes what you're doing unimpeachable to people that are going, because I don't know how many speaking engagements you've had or like how deep into this that you are, but people are going to start throwing shade. And the more that you achieve, the more the knives are going to come out and people are going to dig, and you're going to find yourself in a lot of crosshairs. But as long as you keep telling the truth and you keep achieving, man, it's just people love to, to throw rocks at things that shine, to quote one of the greatest poets of our age, apparently. But I mean,
you're running a great race, brother. That's the best way I'll put it.
100%.
You're putting it all out there. You're being completely honest with things. And truly, as you stated earlier, your ability to speak about it in a sense is not... to speak about it as openly and as raw as possible is something that a lot of people don't have the capability of doing without it bringing up some kind of deep-rooted sort of recessed trauma that causes them to not be able to speak about it. And that's a weapon at this point in time, brother. It's a weapon that you can use to be able to drive this home correctly for people who need to hear it, and to show again the ability to overcome, which is truly the greatest part of it all.
It sounds like you've slayed these demons. And
yeah,
so
man.
You're speaking from a place of being victorious.
Oh yeah,
and that's what gives it so much power.
Yeah, like I just recently heard about this. I didn't know this was a thing, but there's like this thing called the hero's journey. The guy leaves the village, slays the dragon, returns back, and he's this new man. He's got these stories to tell, and that's kind of how I feel now. It's like I've gone and I've killed this fucking guy, I've killed this fucking giant, I've killed this person who I used to be. And now look at me, like I'm here to show you guys, like if you take this route, you take this path, you can do the same thing. To the point of like why I tell my story the way I do. Here's the thing that a lot of trauma victims do is it's a shock factor, right? You start sitting around a fucking bonfire comparing trauma. Well, I got raped this many times. I got raped this many times. Well, I got, it's like, Jesus Christ, guys. Like, what's the fucking... Look, okay? The fucking... I don't ever tell my story to be shocking, okay? I tell my story, and here's a telltale sign of that, in my opinion. When you hear somebody telling their story, if they're like full of smiles and they're all giddy and they're all like whatever the fuck, it's like, look, man, you are either a shit storyteller or you are just doing this for the shock factor, okay? There's an art to storytelling, okay? When I tell you about these deep, dark moments of my life, I don't tell it with a smile on my face. And I'm not necessarily upset about the moment anymore, but there is a level of emotion that you are trying to get people to feel. Why do you get people to feel emotion? Because you want people to fucking care about it, okay? Why do I want people to care about it? Because child trafficking, the exploitation of children is the largest industry in the fucking world right now. Over $800 billion. Okay.
Yep. More human slaves now than there ever has been in history.
Yes. There are, America is the number one consumer. Okay. Now I'm about to drop some numbers on y'all, so just be ready.
I'm really glad that we
Awesome.
circled
I've
back
got
around
some
to doing
stacks
this
of them too.
because
We'll lace up
This
here.
this shit needs to be drug out into the light.
Dude.
And exposed for what it is, and people need to come face to face with it, because a lot of Americans just want to bury their head in the sand and pretend like it's not happening. And not only is it happening, but before you start going through the numbers, odds are it's happening down the street from you.
Yeah, it is.
Mm-hmm.
It 100% is. It's 1 in 4 boys and 1 in 3 girls will face some sort of sexual assault abuse before they're 18 years old. Okay? 1 in 10 report. So for every one, there's 9 other victims. The average age of reporting is 53 years old. So most people live their entire lives before they say anything. I have had, at this point, I don't know how many, grown men, 50, 60 years old, approach me. I've had people as old as 70 years old, almost 80, message me and email me telling me that my story resonated with them and they've never told anybody in their entire life. Because they can't fucking say it. They can't say the words out loud. I tell my story as graphically as I do. Like there's a story that I tell sometimes where the guy tried to use his finger on me, but he had long nails and it hurt. And I came back the next weekend and he had clipped his nails so that he could use his fingers on me like a gentleman, like he was being kind about it. Okay? I tell my stories, the graphicness, not because they're shocking, but because I want people to realize, like, when we talk about kids being exploited, we're not talking about like your weird fucking brother like touching your daughter's ass. We're talking about like fathers and mothers taking pictures of their children in bathtubs and saying who wants them tonight. Posting them on the internet saying who wants them tonight. I'm talking about like children by the time they're 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, they are so desensitized to sex that when another man walks in the room, they just assume that is what is going to happen. It is almost not even scary to them anymore. It is just like playing fucking Scrabble. It is just like, this man is going to come in, I'm going to do this thing, and he's going to leave. And that is all that men are for, is doing these acts. Like, there are so many fucking children in the world going through this shit, and there are so many organizations that are trying to stop it, and the powers that be are fucking stopping them from stopping it. There is a organization, Sentinel Foundation, run by Matt Murphy. He's fucking incredible. He's a former Green Beret. Fucking incredible guy. His organization rescues trafficked children. They are partnered with Tim Tebow's foundation, I believe. I might be misstating that, but they're associated in some form or fashion. Nonetheless, Tim Tebow is one of the most profound characters in the fucking world. Everybody knows who fucking Tim Tebow is, okay? His platform gets little to no engagement. His platform about like rescuing children, with millions of followers that he has, and everybody knows who he is, his platform about rescuing children gets like little to no attention, little to no engagement. Most people don't even know he has a platform dedicated to saving children. And it's because the systems and the powers that be shadow ban and get rid of this shit, and they push it away because they don't want the fucking world to see it. They'll post some girl getting fucked in the back of a van, but they won't fucking share all this tragedy that these kids are going through. And the last thing I'll say, I'll let one of y'all take it from here, is there was, I think it was Operation Light Shine, which is another child trafficking rescuing organization. They went to Congress and asked for more money in the federal budget to rescue children. The national budget for drug trafficking was $42 billion. The national budget for human trafficking, and to include children, was like $240 million. $240 million to $40 billion with a B to stop drugs.
Which they're doing a terrible freaking job at.
Well, and when they went to Congress and they asked for more money to fight human trafficking, they actually reduced the budget by like $20 million. I'll drop one more on you, then I'll stop, because I get fucking fired up about this shit.
Please, man, this is
so
we're having you on tonight to hear what you have to say, brother.
Dude. Okay. The ASPCA, the last time I looked this up, if I'm correct, they raise, I think, over $1 billion a year. I think about 800 million.
TJ, can you go look that up?
Of course.
Yeah, I think it's like 850 million is the numbers that I would find. Somewhere between 850 million to $1 billion a year. I don't know if the ASPCA is private or nonprofit or whatever the fuck. All I know is they fucking save cats and dogs and they raise a shit ton of money. So that's just one organization. So if you look at the ASPCA and then plus all of the other humane shelters, humane societies for dogs and cats, I mean, we're in the billions of dollars. We're in several $1 billion raised for animals every year.
Well, you know what the problem is? The Tim Tebow Foundation and the others, they don't have Sarah McLachlan singing for them. And
yeah, you know, the fucking problem is it's not fucking sexy to go and save kids. Corporate events will put up fucking companies will literally pay thousands of dollars to have fucking dogs and cats out in front of their office just to say like, oh, come and adopt the fucking dog. Meanwhile, all these fucking kids are looking for a fucking place to live. And these fucking companies they would rather post a dog on the fucking billboard on the highway saying, come and rescue me. I mean, I'm sorry, dude. They're dogs and cats. Like, I love dogs. I got a dog myself. Okay? Fucking love them. But they are not more important than our children. Not so much to the extent that we are housing millions and millions of cats and dogs, and we have hundreds. We are housing millions of dogs and cats, and we are missing 500,000 kids. Mm-hmm. I mean, what the fuck, man? Like, why can't we fucking take that money and fucking put it somewhere else? And it's because people just don't give a fuck, man. People don't give a fuck about the kids. The people that work in those humane shelters, I get it, man. Everybody's got a fucking job. Everybody loves cats and dogs. But, dude, there is way too much fucking money going to some fucking bullshit like some fucking cat and dog food than saving children.
Absolutely, and actually to put that in perspective with this thrown up here, it's increased unthinkably here over the course of the last 6 to 7 years. Their normal, I guess, average their raisings starting back in 2018 were 191 million annually, which has blossomed up to 717 million as of 2024. So over the course, basically, of the last 6 to 7 years here, people are donating far more money to them than they ever did before.
Go back to Donald Trump finally raising awareness for this about what was going on there in Little Haiti.
Oh,
Ohio,
right, yeah, the cats and the dogs.
Everybody knows they're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats.
Oh, brother, just that song coming out probably made them another $100 million bucks.
I'm sure it did. But I went and I looked up the Tim Tebow Foundation while you were talking, Seth, and just to corroborate what you're saying about him being shadow banned, I typed in Tim Tebow and Google auto finished for me, Tim Tebow Foundation, and I said yes. So I clicked on the auto finish that Google was giving me. That's important. And even though it was the auto finish, the Tim Tebow Foundation wound up underneath all of the sponsored ads on the Google page and wound up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 links down. And Google auto finished it for me and said, this is what you're looking for, and still buried it under all the sponsored links that have nothing to do with it. So, yeah, if you look at his Instagram, that's really like a big one. If you look at it, because I don't know how many followers that page in particular has, but I mean, Tim Tebow has about 2 or 3 million followers. His foundation page gets a comment or two. Like somebody with millions of followers, they can post and within a heartbeat, I mean, just fucking flooded with comments, like, shares, right? The organization is not. And it's not, it just shows, man. It's just upsetting. It upsets me because I think about all of the kids that are going through this, and people just, they want to put their fucking heads in the sand. And they don't want to admit that it's happening. Do you think it's because they generally don't give a fuck, which I'm quoting you, or do you think it's because they don't know, or do you think it's because it's hard to admit and they don't want to they're scared to deal with it? What do you think?
I think it's multifaceted. I think on the common man's plate, I think that a lot of people don't know and when they find out, they don't even want to be a part of it because it's sickening. I mean, it hurts my stomach when I see some of this shit. It is, and I understand it is not for everybody. The point that I'm making is not like I'm not asking everybody to get out there and fight the fight. All I'm asking is like why the government is so hell bent on raising money and why people are so hell bent on raising money for shit that just does not fucking matter. Like, I don't understand that. Now, when you talk higher level things, I think organizations, companies, senators, I think the government, I do think that those people have connections. I think that they are benefiting off of the backs of these fucking kids.
Without question, there are some that are. I absolutely agree.
Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't make sense, man. And to think that the cartel can come by and say, look, we'll pay you fucking $5 million, shut your fucking mouth. I mean, these guys have no obligation or desire to fucking help anybody when somebody shows up and says, we'll give you $5 million.
Soulless.
Yeah, there's no incentive to do anything about it. And, there's been Ryan Montgomery. He works for the Sentinel Foundation, I believe, or he used to. He may still do it, but he was on Sean Ryan's show, and he talks about catching a former West Virginia or Virginia state senator, some sort of state representative. You can Google it. It's like some like state representative caught in the Denver airport. I can't remember where he ran or what part he was where he was a part of.
Jamie, look that up.
But thanks, Jamie. But Ryan Montgomery, he spotted that he found this guy's website. This guy had built out a website on the dark web or whatever the fuck you want to call it of selling children. And Ryan Montgomery found it, exposed it, and emailed all these Congress people, all these fucking people about this website, about this guy, and everybody put it on the back burner. And everybody's like, oh, whatever, ignored it. And 6 months later, the guy was caught in the Denver airport and was arrested. And Ryan Montgomery reached out to all those people and said, and he was arrested for kidnapping and raping a 13-year-old girl. And Ryan Montgomery let everybody know that he had told them about him previously, and nobody fucking did anything. And if they would have taken action on this guy, that little girl wouldn't have been kidnapped and raped. And it makes you wonder, like, it makes you wonder why there's not a bigger fight, why there's fucking kids getting medical procedures, why there's all that bullshit out fucking west with kids. And I mean, I don't know where all the fuck it's at now, but I know in California, it's obviously more prominent there, or I think so anyways. But, it just makes you wonder, man. It makes you wonder, It just sucks. So
no doubt, no doubt
dude,
about it.
Some of the stuff that you're saying that you said tonight is absolutely incredible, and I'm really glad that we had you on to talk about it, because, like I said, this shit needs to be drug out into the light so that people can see it for what it is. And TJ, if you do have,
were you talking about Nathan Larson?
Yes,
Admitted pedophilia advocate. Yeah. Self-proclaimed pedophilia advocate who once ran for political office in Virginia, was accused of grooming and kidnapping a 12-year-old girl. He died in federal custody.
Such a shame.
So,
and if you could pull up the rest of those stats, TJ.
Yeah, I've got a ton of them here, actually.
But just so people understand, like, where we stand on this channel as Christians, right? Even Jesus Christ said in the Sermon on the Mount that it would be better for a man to tie a millstone around his neck and throw himself into the sea than to stand before the throne of God having harmed one of these little ones.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly how I feel about it. I can't abide anybody that would harm a kid. And if you're just the absolute scum of the earth. And
absolutely.
Woe to you, man, when you stand before God one of these days, if you don't get your judgment here, like, you will get it. But yeah, TJ, if you've got some of those stats pulled up,
sets
people need
of
to hear
statistical data are kind of interesting here. The first set of averages was run from 2020 to 2022, basing that in the United States, and that's where I'm going to stick with a lot of these, but there are some contrasts I'll throw out there from some other countries as well to give some perspective as to how much worse our problem is here than a lot of other places that you would assume. About 460,000 children go missing every year. Now, that was in that particular study. 8 million missing children per year go missing in other parts of the world, but there are many cases that never get reported. So 460,000 in the U.S., about 8 million worldwide. Missing child statistics by country, however, if you wanted to look at other large countries, in Australia and Spain, about 20,000 kids are reported missing every year. In India, the number's about 96,000. Russia, 45,000. 100,000 for Germany, 112,853 is the specific count the United Kingdom gave, trying to state they know exactly how many children are missing. Maybe if they do, they're not doing a good job preventing it, but they're also keeping a lot better track of it than we are. Nonetheless, basically, it puts us at almost 4 times the amount of anybody, and far more than some other countries as well. But here is the kicker on this. 2024 is the flip. The U.S. Department of Justice has reported that 797,500 children younger than 18 are reported missing in a 1-year study period starting from the end of 2023 to where we stand right now in 2024. An average of 2,185 children reported missing every single day.
And that's just missing children for trafficking person. Like so there
203,900 of those were found to be victims of family abductions, as we discussed earlier.
Okay.
58,200 children were victims of non-family abductions. 115 children were listed as being victims of stereotypical kidnapping, like somebody being snatched off the street, kind of like the weirdo movie stuff that really doesn't happen anywhere near as much as these other types. But coming from there is where this gets interesting. This is coming from the Amber Alert Department from the federal government themselves. As of December 6, 2024, so remember the statistic here for 2024, that in the United States, 797,500 children were reported missing. From the Amber Alert Society, as of December 6, 2024, 1,221 children were successfully recovered using the Amber Alert system, and 195 children were rescued because of wireless emergency alerts. There are 81 Amber Alert plans running throughout the United States currently. So to kick that back, we're talking about almost 800,000 missing kids. 1,221 children were recovered through Amber Alert.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not nearly enough. Do you have any stats pulled up
Oh, no.
about sexual assault rates among kids?
Yeah, not specifically just sexual assault, but on child abuse. From the National Children's Alliance and the federal affiliates, an estimated 558,899 children in individual unique incidents or victims of abuse and neglect in the United States between 2022 and 2023. Most recent year for which there is national fully composed data. 8 children out of every 1,000 have suffered some form of abuse, whether it be physical or sexual.
And that's only what we have from reporting.
Correct.
Right? So
yes.
Estimated rates way, way higher. So we got dudes, we got some fucking work to do, because if we can't,
no doubt. And I guess coming from the same society to kind of get this put in, as far as the way it broke down, very similar to what you said earlier, Seth. One, for just overall abuse, not specifically sexual abuse, physical abuse or whatever else, 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 13 boys in the United States are estimated and expected to experience some form of child abuse, and that 1 billion children globally are estimated to experience sexual violence over the course of the next 18 months.
Yeah.
If we can't protect the innocent and the
1 billion.
defenseless among us, then what are we doing? And I've been saying this as like a semi-joke, but it's really not. Seth, you threw out the statistic. The United States, whether or not you guys like to admit it or not, is the #1 consumer of child trafficking in the world. And
in that, I kind of wanted to reach out about one other thing that's making a lot of this more prevalent.
If we don't do something about this here pretty soon, then God's going to owe Sodom and Gomorrah an apology. Because, these numbers... it's fucking evil. This shit is fucking evil. So
absolutely.
Yeah, TJ, what else did you have, man?
Well, as I've stated many times in the past, of course, with a tool as vast as the internet, these types of crimes are able to be perpetuated much differently.
Yep.
And a lot of victims are much more easily found because they can be found very easily through the internet, via forums, via forms of identification. And the disgusting part is there's networks of these pedophiles and these abusers, these human traffickers. They speak to each other, they educate each other on ways to communicate with these victims, the places that they can frickin' find them and everything else. And one-way digital technology and human trafficking, it basically intersects when traffickers are using online platforms to try to exploit victims, which happens all the time. People pose as like other teenagers or other young people going through problems, and you could be talking to, a 50-year-old man, but he's acting as if he's a 15-year-old boy who's had a series of things, kind of fishing it out there. And unfortunately, because the internet is such a vast entity, and I have to throw this kind of from the innocent side of it all, so many different online platforms give the ability for adults to connect to children. It is unthinkable. Primary one that always comes to my mind, Roblox. Roblox harvests millions upon millions upon millions of user-made games, and in the Roblox environments, if you're using a PC or if you're using a mobile device, anything outside a console, you have the ability to chat. Now, you can shut that off, and as a parent, you can put restriction modes in place. They ask you to verify your age, but they don't ask you to verify your age with a verifying tool. They ask you to verify by telling them what your age is, which, of course,
Kinda
most
like,
kids, knowing that they're
like
going to
when you
have
go into a porn
restrictions.
site. Hey, you're 18, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
Oh, yeah, and with most kids knowing that they're going to get probably restrictions on content or whatever, they're always going to say they're an adult. So then you've got this opening for these conversations, and I've experienced this as a parent because my kids liked to play Roblox, so I kept them in kind of a safe show with it, and I started interacting and playing with them. Like, my youngest really liked Theme Park Tycoon 2, and he was having a hard time building his own park, so I decided I would build one for him, which we'll get into that another time, brother, but I actually got to the point where the developer contacted me because my park got so popular. I spent stupid time on this for my kid, and by the time it was all said and done with, like, very few people can play it because there's so much lag in that park trying to load that most devices can't even run my park. Because it's insane. It's like... It's unthinkably huge, but in that,
Dad, I thought
throughout
you said
the whole time I was
we
doing
were gonna
that, and
play
all
Roblox.
these,
Yeah, hold on.
that's that lack of sleep, man. When I'm up in the middle of the night, he got me set on that, and the next thing I know, I'm getting into the aesthetics, and I customized every brick of that freaking
Oh,
place.
my
But oh yeah, dude, it's insane, it's unthinkable, but. In that, while I was doing all that and people were visiting it, I'm getting all these chat just piling,
Right.
and I'm seeing this thing with all these numbers on it. So I click on it and I see all these conversations, and in it I see all these people asking questions like, hey, can you tell me how to build? I can give you permissions on my park and stuff like that. And it occurs to me, as I'm kind of politely trying to just say, oh, just go to this setting on a menu or do this or do that, I thought, I wonder how many of these people, how many of these messages are coming from people's children.
Yeah.
And it kind of just set me back from it, and I'm like, whoa, man. Then I felt kind of odd, and I'm like, okay, if my kids play this game, these are probably somebody else's kids asking me questions about how I built this park. And me as an everyday guy, knowing that I don't have any ill intent, that's all fine and dandy. But how many people out there do have ill intent? And
Right.
even just misguided asshole kids. I mean, I hate to have to put it out there, but I know of somebody. I'm not going to completely knock them out here. Young person who big in the gaming environment, who once he was in that like 18, 19-year-old pocket, used to like to go to places where they knew there was a younger element, and they troll these children for fun. You know what I'm saying? Like, not anything malicious, and definitely not anything along the lines of the kind of stuff we're talking about. But they'd like punk them. They'd beat them in games intentionally, make fun of them, put stuff in the chat, tell them they suck, stuff like that.
Sure.
And very immature, stupid-ass things to do. Stupid-ass things that a lot of people do. Regardless, unfortunately, we all have done stupid things and kind of either picked on somebody or whatever else at different points in time. I certainly regretted that, but it really kind of hit me for a second, and I thought, okay, if these people's kids are just this easily communicating with me, asking for tips on how to make a better theme park,
Right.
who's talking to my kids?
That's a really good point, and I actually wrote this down in my notes over here, Seth, while you were going through your thing, because you had asked the question. It's like, hey, what would you do if you found out that something had happened to your kid, when you were talking about how it keeps people from reporting, knowing that dad's going to fly off the handle or whatever the case was, and then that immediately, and to your point too, TJ, that immediately made me take a step back and go, well, I would hope that I'm a good enough father that I would recognize before my kid ever wound up in a situation like that. And so then I'm like, well, how do you find your child in a situation like that where it progressed that far and you didn't notice? And so I actually wrote down over here, this is where us as fathers, like, be involved in your
Oh,
kids'
dude.
lives and
Dude.
know what the hell is going on with them and just be there, be present.
Yep.
And this shit will never progress to that level because you're fucking paying attention.
Dude.
One of the
What
most
your kids
overlooked
are
things as a
doing.
dad, and one of the most important things as
Bro.
a dad, both right there, is just presence,
There's-
just care.
So there was two things that came to mind. First, TJ, when you were telling that story about Roblox and everything and whatever, Ryan Montgomery in the Sean Ryan show, in that podcast, he pops open his laptop, gets into a chat, gets into a teen chat. There's all kinds of teen chats. You can just Google them and you'll find one. And anybody can get into them. Anybody can get into them. And Ryan Montgomery gets in there, puts his name as like Kate 13, okay? Obviously, Kate, 13-year-old girl, okay? Says, hey, what's up? That's all he says. Within a minute, less than 60 seconds, he has like 8 messages. 3 of them are adults, like grown, like 30, 40-year-old men. Within the next like 2 to 3 minutes, he gets confirmed, verifiable, like messages from another man saying that he is okay that the girl is a girl and that she's 13 years old. And he like confirms like multiple times, like, are you sure like everything is okay? Guy's good to go. Even though he's like in his 40s. Okay, so that's how quick it happens. Like within minutes. I mean, it's just like boom, as soon as you get in there. And the fucked up part about that is Ryan Montgomery, he can hack into anything. He's like one of the best hackers in the world. He can hack into anything. He can hack into this guy's computer. He can find child porn on somebody's computer. Find this person is doing all of the unethical things towards children, and we can't do anything about it. It's not illegal to get into a chat room and say things to girls. It's just not. Apparently, it's not. So unless they show up in person, and there has to be the jurisdiction has to be on board with it and investigating. So there's a lot of these like vigilantes out there.
I've seen some of seen some of those guys that go out and they try to grab
Yep,
these guys, and the local law enforcement won't touch them.
Right, local. Yeah, as soon as that vigilante makes contact with the pedophile, the local law enforcement's out because there's too many legalities in the way that stop it from happening. I 100% understand protection of privacy and those things, but there's got to be something that we can do that says, if you are caught messaging a fucking girl or a little boy or a little girl on a chat room, that you're going to be punished. So with that, you were talking about paying attention. Okay. Tim Tebow Foundation posts this video. They do this often. If you look at their Instagram, you'll find it. It is actual conversation that they post on Instagram between 2 little league coaches. And what it was one of the coaches texted one. He says, "Oh man, you're not gonna believe what happened today." What happened? "Oh, this little girl came up and gave me a hug, and she put her head right in my crotch." And and then he says it's very clear that her mom was there, but she wasn't paying attention. And I don't think there's a dad in the picture. Her mom takes the little girl to practice, is on her phone the whole time. She's on her phone while her little girl's out there with the little league coach, and this guy's putting her head in his crotch, hugging her, texting another coach about her. And then they're going back and forth, and the one guy's saying, hey man, maybe you're lucky, and the mom will just give her away to you. And then, because he's texting the other coach, he says, hey, I think I got a good one here. I think I got a good one on this one. I think we can get away with this one. I mean, these are little league fucking coaches, man. Like I-9 sports kind of shit. You fucking take your kids out there to go play. And that's, like you said, you have to be present, man. The first thing they look for is a threat, okay? The first thing they look for is a threat. The father that's out there who's imposing, who's paying attention, who is outspoken potentially is a threat. Dude, when I take my kids to family outings, I take them to, my son had a birthday party, and in the South, it's very common for older people to kiss kids. Kiss them on the cheek, kiss them on the head. And I his teacher picked him up and kissed him on the head. My son's 4 years old. I said, hey, don't ever kiss my kids ever again. And I wasn't being rude. I didn't make a scene. I was very quiet and professional about it. I just said, hey, don't ever kiss my kids again. And she thought I was joking. And so she kissed him again out of like a nervous reaction, to which I said, no, I'm being serious. Do not ever kiss my kids again. She put my son down and she walked out of the place. Okay. I received messages later that day, or maybe not that day, maybe a couple days later. I actually didn't get the messages. Somebody else got the messages saying, Seth didn't have to do that. Seth didn't have to embarrass her like that. She was just being nice. She was whatever. I don't give a fuck what she was being. She was violating my personal bubble by kissing my fucking kid on the head. And my 4-year-old son is not going to be the one that has to determine where do the kisses stop. Do they stop here? Do they stop here? Do they stop on my chest? Where do they stop? My son is not going to be the one that has to make that decision. Nobody fucking kisses you. That's what my fucking kids know. Nobody kisses you except mommy and daddy. And we kiss you on the fucking head. I'm not fucking kissing you in the mouth. I kiss you on the head. There is nothing that a parent benefits from kissing their kid in the mouth versus kissing their kid on the head. I'm sorry. Like, I kissed my daughter maybe once on the mouth when she was a little baby. I don't even think I did that. It's just, to me, it is innately weird, but I understand it as a parent. I can empathize. I do get it. I'm not saying you're weird and a pedophile if you've ever kissed your kid in the mouth. What I'm telling you is to consider the difference between kissing them on the head and the mouth. Does it benefit you? If not, kiss them on the fucking head, okay? So I wanted to circle up on a couple of the things with the online stuff. Paying attention is incredibly important. I'm telling you, these people are watching you and the way that you interact with their kids. And so many fucking parents go to the park and they get on their phones and they don't fucking watch their kids. They go to the practices and the coach wants some alone time with the kid. Hey, your kid's getting really good. Let me take him over here and let's get some extra time in after school. You know, and I'm telling you, man, it's a slippery fucking slope. And I just. Whew, yeah, man.
It's rough too, because it's like I want my, I have 4 boys. I want my boys to be able to have a certain amount of autonomy like I had when I was a kid. I like the whole idea of like free range parenting. Now I have a different living situation than a lot of people, where I live, behind military security on base, right? So it's like I'm dealing with the on post situation, and there's a park behind my house that I can see from my kitchen window. My kids know that, at least my 2 older boys are allowed to go around the pond behind my house to go over to the park, and they stay where I can see them. Or I got my son one of those Gab watches so that I can immediately pull up on my phone, know exactly where he is, text him, call him, whatever I have to do. It's pretty cool. He's got a little Dick Tracy watch, and he's only 11. But it's like we're giving them that autonomy so that they can go out, make their own decisions, be a little free range, run around with the kids in the neighborhood. But at the same time, before we ever got to that level, we had stranger danger conversation. We had the conversations about who do we talk to? Is another adult ever allowed to lay hands on you? No. If you're ever uncomfortable, what do you do? And my son knows the scream as loud as I can and run and make a giant scene if you absolutely have to, but get out and come and find me. And I was like, and then if dad has to go, open a can of whoop ass, then daddy will come over and, we're going to handle this situation. Right. But it's like, it's terrible that we live in the world that we do now, to where it's like I do want my kids to be able to run around outside like I was able to do when I was a kid, and I never ran into any problems, thank God. But nowadays, like if I lived in like suburban Ohio somewhere, like no, I would not let my kids like free range run around the neighborhood, especially when I don't know my neighbors. And that also speaks to, we should be building communities where we have people in our community that we can trust, that will look out after our children. And that goes into an entirely other thing that we don't have time to crack open tonight. But Seth, I wanted to circle around here on the end and ask, from your experience and the people that you're working with, for anybody that listens through this, if they've made it this far, what are some resources that you would put out there for people to look into? I know we talked about Tim Tebow. You talked about the Tim Tebow Foundation. I've got it pulled up here. The Sentinel Foundation, I believe you said. Are there any others that you would promote?
Yeah, so Sentinel Foundation, just so you know, if you look it up, their website is foundationsentinel.org, I believe. But they're great guys. Matt Murphy, he's the president of the company, I believe now. And he's just a fucking stellar human being with what he's doing. So those are those are pretty big organizations, I would say. Locally, if you're really interested, if you really feel freaking the conviction to maybe try to get a little bit more involved, I would look up Mom Army and Dad Army. They have a website. I just got connected with them. They're based out of Phoenix, but they're all over the place. and they're just a combination of moms and dads who are basically advocating for the, abolition. My bad, wrong word.
Whoop.
Abolition, abolition, fucking A. Can't, you know what? Cancel this fucking interview.
And thanks, guys. That was like,
Yeah, they're not advocating for the abortion. They're advocating for the basically abolishing child exploitation, any crimes against children. So the lady who runs the show, her name's Seek Smith. She calls herself an abolitionist because of that, because she's trying to stop child crimes. And so they have like different chapters around the states. The more people that get involved, the more they'll do. But what they do is, in grand scheme of things, is they try to educate the local populations on policies and things like that to vote on. Because a lot of times people don't understand what's going on. I am in that bubble of I don't know what the fuck to vote on and what's going on and what's to push, what not to push. And so they will have these rallies and local presence to get people to vote for certain things. And an example of that would be another great girl. Her name's Kaylee Kozak. She's involved with them. She is in Arizona, but she just recently passed a bill or some fucking form of law that basically says if you are participating in the purchase or sale of a child, you will face your natural life in prison. Not like 15 to 25. You will go to prison for the rest of your natural life in Arizona. I believe it's called Kaylee's Law. And so she's trying to get that passed nationwide. So she's a great person to follow. And the reason why I follow these people is because when they post something and then I can do something about it, I will take action, right? It's not going to be today or tomorrow, but when the mom army and the dad army comes to Georgia and there's something that happens in Georgia that I can affect, then I will do it and I will take effect and do that, So the more people that follow these kind of organizations and get involved, and all it takes is a simple, if you reach out to me and you tell me you want to be involved, I will let Seek know and maybe there's a connection to be made, okay? With that stuff. And like I said, it's not going to be this like grand thing where it's like, hey, we're connected and now we're changing the world. This is a process that unfortunately we are not going to see the fruits of our labor, more than likely. These things are going to take 20 to 30, 40 years to change. But if we don't do shit about it now, it's going to go south much, much faster than it will fix itself.
That complacency and that
constant,
we're not really making
100%.
A difference. You can see that's a huge, huge problem we've had, period. It's our downfall in so many different areas, in an area as significant and as crucial as this, and also in areas that we even, handle situations here in our own government. It's how we ended up where we're at right now, having so many complications with our government, with the economy and everything else, is making all these concessions and going, oh, well, nothing's going to change in this time frame, so I'm just going to go ahead and let it slide off my shoulder. And that mentality is exactly why we progressively fail. So definitely need to take action where you can.
For evil to triumph is that good men do nothing. And
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the main
of good
point
men.
here on the end. Hey, Jamie, thank you so much for coming on tonight, man. We covered so much. I really appreciate you being willing to share your story and to share it so candidly. I really hope that we can have you on again. I know this is your second time on I Came With Fire, so thank you for coming back, and I hope that we can have you on again to get updates on your book and what's going on with you. I'm going to throw it over to you so that you can plug your book, plug all of your social medias and all that. And then if you do you have a place where people can contact you that you would be okay with us putting down in the show notes? If you have that, could you put that too, and we'll make sure we'll get in the show notes of this episode.
Yeah, Seth Gehle. If you Google me, you'll find me. I have a website as well, SethGehle.com. Instagram is the easiest way, Seth_Gehle. Google me. It's all connected. It's all fucking, there's links to fucking everything that you find one page, you'll find the rest of them. But yeah, man, I appreciate you guys. This is, once again, one of the best conversations I've had. The first one was the same way, dude. Just a fucking phenomenal conversation. And this is twice now I've been on here and told my story. So the next one we'll just have to get on here and just get right to the fucking shit of changing the fucking world.
Hell
Yeah,
yes.
for sure. I do apologize for taking you back to the beginning.
No.
All right.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I just next time we'll get in here and just talk a bit about whatever else. My book, there it is. There's your shameless plug. Strength Beyond the Shadows. It's available on Amazon, so Amazon's the best way to find it.
Awesome.
Yeah, man, I would encourage anybody if you're interested in purchasing it, dude. I say this, but buy a copy. There's somebody in your life who's been affected by this in some form or fashion. There's somebody nearby, so buy one for a friend. Give it away to a local child advocacy group. That's what the story's for, man. It's for people that are trying to get out of this hole and realize that they're not alone, and adversity and trauma affects us all. And so, yeah, thanks, man. Thank you guys so much. This is
Thank you, brother.
great
Absolutely.
conversation.
Thank you for taking extra time tonight to kind of really be able to lay a little bit more of a broad scope on this for everybody. It is really important, and right now there's a lot of visibility. As we kind of mentioned earlier, to put another plug out there for who's also taking care of us, Rumble has taken off exponentially and has become the free speech entity that is sitting and starting to actually take fire away from YouTube, which everybody thought was absolutely impossible. So right now, visibility on Rumble is ultra high, and this story being able to come back out in its entirety at this kind of peak of visibility is going to be very beneficial to a lot of people, I feel. So 100%. Beautiful for you to go ahead and take the time to share everything with us.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Hey guys, thank you so much for hanging out. If you made it this far, I'm not going to restate all the sponsors, but you'll be able to find them down there in the show notes. Jamie, if you could, we're going to grab the Amazon link to your book. We'll put that in the show notes down below too, so people can find you super easy. And guys, if you haven't done it yet, go over to the Discord, I Came With Fire. You can get over there with us. That is actually us that you're talking to when you're in there. And if you have anything that you want us to pass on to Seth, if you drop it in there, we can absolutely get it on to him. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode tonight. Go ahead and hit that like button. I know we covered a lot today, and this conversation got super deep. So I'm going to end with a little bit of a palate cleanser, because I promised you that I would, Seth, and this is actually a really funny story, but it's that military tattoo story that I promised I'd get back to. So there was a dude that our paths crossed, and he was a senior NCO in the Army, and I think a little bird must have told him or something that he was going to make the E8 list. So homeboy was one of those guys that was getting his stripes tattooed on his shoulder. He had his 3 up, and then he had his 2 down. So he went, preemptively, because he was supposed to make the list, went and got his 3rd rocker. He went ahead and got it tattooed on there. And then lo and behold, wouldn't you know it, the E8 list got published, and homeboy wasn't on it. So then he had to run around with a Master Sergeant tattoo on his shoulder.
Oh, no.
Just committing stolen valor, dude. And it was, if you knew this guy, I mean, he was one of those people that you're just like, you kind of deserve to have that happen to you. I don't feel bad for you at all. What a douche.
That's
but anyway,
awesome.
So everybody knows one of those guys in your life. Look, man, don't go get it tattooed on until you're sure it's in the bank, right? Just throwing that one out there. But anyway, thank you guys so much for sticking around. This has been I Came With Fire podcast. Go ahead and hit that like button, and hey, give it a follow if you enjoyed this. It's not going to cost you anything. We'll see you guys next week.
Fantastic. Take care, everybody.